Copyright 2025 by Samantha Price. All rights reserved. Chapter 1. So, do you ever feel like there's something seriously wrong with you? Ettie asked, staring at her sister, who was sitting in her usual chair knitting. Elsa-May looked up. Will you sit down instead of pacing? What exactly are you talking about now? Ettie sat down on the couch, and Kelly the cat immediately jumped into her lap. While patting the cat, Ettie continued, Well, sometimes I think when I die they'll find out that I had a serious disease, or maybe two. Then they'll say, how did she last so long? Do you ever feel that way? Elsa-May chuckled. No, and no one will be investigating your old body. They'll assume you died of old age. Eddie's mouth turned down at the corners. That's not good. Never assume anything. What if I was murdered? That's not going to happen. The trouble with you is you think too much. You need to be doing less thinking and more doing. What happened to bird watching? You haven't touched your binoculars in days. Ettie huffed and looked over at her binoculars. They remind me of poor old what's-his-name. Oh, Ettie, it was Don. Ja. They remind me of poor old Don. We're leaving the house today. Will that make you happy? Eddie's eyebrows rose. Depends where we're going. I have to take my latest knitting projects to Freda. She's organizing what's going to the hospital and what's going to the charity stores. She sure loves to organize and take charge of everything. I know you two haven't always seen eye to eye about things, but she does good work. Do you want to come with me or not? Elsa-May asked. Ettie looked away. I'll have to think about it. Suit yourself. When are we going? Ettie asked. As soon as I finish this row of knitting. A few moments later she looked up at Ettie with a satisfied smile. They're all done. We can head over to Freda's now. I suppose I'll come too. Shall we take Snowy with us? Elsa-May shook her head. No, because she might have the chickens roaming about. Ah yes, those pesky chickens. He'd probably chase them. Ettie got up from the couch, gently moving Kelly the cat to the side. Freda might be a bit bossy, but at least she gives us eggs. That's right. Elsa-May's eyes lit up. And not just any eggs, Freda's chickens lay the biggest, fluffiest eggs you've ever seen. I've been thinking about those eggs all day. Ettie grabbed her bag, shaking her head. Well, I don't know if I'd call eggs fluffy, but those eggs are always larger than normal. You'd think the chickens are working overtime or something. I always wonder what she feeds them. Maybe she talks to them like you talk to your plants. Elsa-May grabbed her coat. I don't talk to my plants. They are just listening when I'm talking to myself. I'm not sure which is the bigger worry. Ettie turned to Snowy their dog and Kelly their cat. Now be good while we're out. Come on, Ettie. They don't know what you're saying. Less talk and more action. Ettie huffed. I've been waiting for you for hours, so don't hurry me along. Elsa-May took Eddie's coat off the hook behind the door and handed it to her. Dank, Ettie said as Elsa-May helped her into it. I can do it by myself. I'm just trying to be helpful. The two sisters headed out the door and walked down to the shanty where they called for a taxi. After they settled into the back seat of the taxi, Elsa-May leaned over and nudged her sister. Remember last time? Freda sent us home with 12 eggs each. I had to make scrambled eggs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner just to use them all up. Ettie grinned, recalling the endless stream of egg-based meals. I made an egg custard. And then another one. And then one more just to get through them all. You love a good custard, don't act like you didn't enjoy them, Elsa-May chuckled. I'm hoping for at least 12 again this time. Freda's chickens really do produce the best. As they continued chatting about Freda's chickens and their remarkable eggs, the taxi stopped in front of Freda's cottage, the cozy little house looking exactly as it always did, with its neat garden and chicken coop visible in the distance. Well, here we are, Elsa-May announced, gathering her knitting projects, and stepped out of the car while Ettie paid the driver. Ettie climbed out and looked around. Freda was often outside the house tending to the garden, or sitting on the porch enjoying the day even when the weather was cool. I don't see her. Maybe she's with the chickens. Could be, Elsa-May agreed. But why don't we do what normal people do and just knock on the door? Ettie shot her sister a look. I am normal. Elsa-May said nothing and continued up the garden path, bags in hand. She placed them to one side while she knocked on the front door. After a few moments of silence, Ettie knocked a bit louder. No answer, Ettie said, her brow furrowing. She's not usually one to be out and about, is she? No, not usually. Elsa-May's eyes narrowed as she peered through the window next to the door. Should we try around the back? I don't like it. Ettie crossed her arms. She lives by herself. What if something's wrong? Oh, don't be so dramatic, Ettie. Freda is as tough as nails. Maybe she's in the back garden or feeding those prize-winning chickens of hers. They walked around to the back of the house, but still no sign of Freda. Maybe she has gone out, Ettie suggested. Elsa-May sighed, her good mood from earlier fading. Well, if she's out, she's out. We can leave the knitted items and come back for a visit later. You mean come back for the eggs, Ettie teased. That's not what I meant. I meant we'll come back for a visit to check on her. She could have gone to a medical appointment, because she's unwell. Now you've got me worried about her. A moment ago you said she was tough, Ettie pointed out. I know, but even the strongest of us can have times when we're not well. That's true. What if she's inside and she's fallen and can't get up? Ettie's eyes widened as her imagination took flight. You're right for once, Ettie. We should at least have a look in the house. Just as Elsa-May had her hand on the door handle, they were distracted by the sound of hoofbeats and creaking buggy wheels. They spun around to see a horse and buggy heading up the driveway. Chapter 2. She's here, he said, moving forward. Elsa-May put her hand over her heart and heaved a sigh of relief. Oh, Ettie. You had me believing the worst. Freda pulled up and climbed down from the buggy and headed over to greet them. Oh, Freda, I'm so pleased to see you. Ettie had me worried that you'd fallen inside and couldn't call out for help. Ettie's mouth dropped open and she stared at her sister. It wasn't just me who was worried. I'm perfectly fine. I'm sorry, Freda said a bit sheepishly. I went into town to run some errands. I completely forgot you were coming by today. Ettie and Elsa-May exchanged a look, but didn't tell her she shouldn't have been expecting them. Freda led them into the house, her worn shoes clacking softly on the wooden floor. The scent of fresh bread and herbs welcomed them as they stepped into the kitchen. Elsa-May set her knitted items down on the couch, and then Freda motioned for them to sit as she set her basket down on the counter. You must be tired from your trip as I am, Freda said as she moved to the stove. I'm sorry, my memory is not what it used to be. What brings you two here today? Where's your knitted things, Elsa-May? Ettie asked. I'll get them to show you, Freda. And they're not things, Ettie. Someone's a bit cranky today, Ettie whispered to Freda when Elsa-May left to grab the parcel of knitted items. Elsa-May returned and settled herself into a chair at the table, pulling out her latest knitting project, a soft pale pink shawl. I've brought over a few things to add to the charity pile, she explained, laying out her knitting with pride. I know you've been working so hard on this, Freda. Freda's face lit up with excitement as she reached for the shawl, her fingers trailing over the soft yarn. Oh, Elsa-May, this is beautiful work. One hospital patient will appreciate this so much. And the color, just perfect. Elsa-May smiled, pleased by Freda's enthusiasm. I've got a few nearly finished pieces at home as well. It's been a good distraction, all this knitting. Distraction from what? Freda asked. Oh, just life, Elsa-May answered vaguely, glancing over at her sister. You know how it is. And Ettie's been talking my ear off about how much she loves your eggs. Ettie grinned. They'd not been there 5 minutes, and her sister was already hinting for eggs. Oh yes, your eggs, Freda. We were just talking about how they're the biggest and best we've ever had. Freda grinned widely. Well, I can get you some to take home. I'll do that now. Oh, we'll come with you, Elsa-May offered. We need to see these chickens, and maybe pick up a few of your secrets. Freda stared at Elsa-May. What secrets? I have none. Elsa-May means you must have secrets of how to get your chickens to have such good eggs. I see. But no. You two stay here and relax. Why don't you make yourselves a nice pot of tea? I won't be long. Before they could object, Freda hurried out of the house, practically rushing toward the chicken coop with an empty basket in her hand. Well, that was odd, Ettie muttered, eyeing the kettle as Elsa-May moved to fill it with water. She's probably just in a hurry, Elsa-May said calmly, though her eyes lingered on the door Freda had just slipped through. Come on, let's make that tea. Freda's always been particular about her chickens. I suppose, but she's never minded us coming to the coop before. What do you think she's hiding? Ettie grabbed the tea canister. Nothing, Elsa-May replied firmly, though doubt flickered in her mind. Now stop worrying about those chickens and help me find the teacups. Ettie chuckled. Maybe she's hiding something in the co-op. Maybe it's not chickens at all. Elsa-May gave her sister a sideways look. Don't be ridiculous. What else would be in there? Maybe she's got a goose laying golden eggs, Ettie teased. Oh, stop it, Elsa-May said, shaking her head. They busied themselves making the tea, but Ettie couldn't help glancing out the window every few minutes, watching as Freda moved about the co-op, her figure bent over as if she was fussing with something. After a few minutes, they were sitting watching the teapot sit in the middle of the table. She is taking a long time. I mean, how long does it take to grab a few eggs? Elsa-May grumbled. Maybe one of the chickens is giving her trouble, Ettie muttered. Let's go and see. Ettie got up and looked out the window, and tried to see the co-op. I can see it a little bit from here, but I can't see all of it. I don't want to go out there because she didn't want us to. That may be so, but something must be wrong, don't you think? Elsa-May asked. Maybe we should go check on her then. Elsa-May nodded. She did seem a bit flustered when we mentioned going with her to get the eggs. I told you something's going on, Ettie muttered as she headed toward the door. If she's upset about coming to find her, I'll just say it was your idea. Ettie rolled her eyes. I'm used to that. The sisters made their way across the yard toward the chicken coop, their feet crunching against the gravel path. You're always so nosy, Ettie, Elsa-May said. Well, you're the one who suggested looking for her, Ettie shot back. Elsa-May shrugged. Maybe she's just having an off day. Or it could be that she came out to the coop and forgot why she was there. Elsa-May laughed at her own suggestion. Oh, that's a bit mean. Well, she did think she was expecting us, so that means she might be losing her mind. That's why it was a mean thing to say. If she's losing her mind, she can't help it. Elsa-May shot back, I didn't say she could. They approached the coop, the large structure housing the many hens looming in front of them. Ettie looked through the wire, but there was no sign of her. Freda. Freda. Elsa-May called out after a moment, her voice slightly louder. Still there was no response. She's nowhere. Where could she be? Ettie nudged Elsa-May. Go inside. Why? We can see she's not there. She might have fallen behind all that hay piled up over there. Elsa-May looked to where Ettie was pointing, and then cautiously opened the door. With Ettie close behind her, Elsa-May looked behind the piled up hay, but there was no sign of their friend. Where is she? Ettie muttered, glancing around. Her eyes suddenly caught something odd at the bottom of some hay. She leaned down and dusted hay off the object. It was a boot sticking out. What's that, Ettie? An old boot. Ettie pulled on it, and quickly found out it was attached to a leg. Ettie's breath caught in her throat as her eyes widened in shock. Elsa-May, it's a body. Elsa-May's heart skipped a beat as she followed Ettie's gaze. Oh no, she whispered, inching closer. Is she dead? Chapter 3. Both sisters backed away from the dead body. Is it Freda? Elsa-May asked. I don't know. They both exchanged a nervous glance before Elsa-May mustered the courage to edge closer. We have to check. Before Ettie could protest, Elsa-May knelt and began pulling the hay away. To their horror, they revealed not Freda, but a man lying motionless. Ettie let out a scream, her hands flying to her mouth. Elsa-May, is he dead? Elsa-May finished, her face pale. I don't know, but you'll need to check. Ettie backed away. I'm not touching him. Elsa-May gave her a stern look. We have to, Ettie. What if he's still alive? We can't just leave him like this. Ettie shook her head furiously, but Elsa-May grabbed her arm, pulling her closer. Just take his pulse. You can do it. You've done it before. Do it now, because if he's still alive you'll have to resuscitate him. Reluctantly, Ettie knelt down beside the man, her hands shaking as she reached for his wrist. She placed 2 fingers on his skin, waiting for any sign of life. But there was nothing. No pulse. He's not breathing, she whispered. He's gone. Elsa-May sighed heavily, her mind racing. We must call someone. The police. The medics. Somebody. I'll do it. Elsa-May helped Ettie to her feet, and then they raced out of the coop, heading for the barn where they knew Freda kept an old rotary phone. Ettie's hands trembled as she fumbled with the dial, finally managing to dial the number for emergency services. 911, what's your emergency? The operator answered calmly. Ettie's voice was shaking. We found a man, in the chicken coop. He's dead. After Ettie gave the address, the operator asked her to stay on the line until someone arrived. Ettie hung up the receiver, her heart pounding in her chest. Elsa-May shot her a frustrated look. Why'd you hang up? I heard her say for you to stay on the line. I don't know. I panicked. Well, they have the address at least, Elsa-May muttered. But what about Freda? Where is she? Both sisters exchanged a worried glance. Freda's absence suddenly felt ominous. She's not in the house, Ettie said, her voice rising in panic. What if something's happened to her too? We have to find her. Elsa-May was already heading for the door. They left the barn as fear gripped their hearts. The chicken coop loomed in the distance, the place where they had made the horrifying discovery just moments before. Freda. Elsa-May called out, her voice shaky as she scanned the area. Freda, where are you? No answer. I don't like this, Ettie whispered, glancing nervously around. Where could she be? Elsa-May took a deep breath. Let's go back to the co-op. Maybe we missed something. Ettie wondered if she meant that they might find Freda somewhere in there too. No. Come on, Ettie. We have to find her. Ettie didn't move. Don't you get it? Remember how she didn't want us to see the chickens? She knew the man was there. Elsa-May slowly nodded. The thought crossed my mind as well, but I quickly chased it out of my head. Freda is not capable of something like this. But still, she knew he was there. Reluctantly, they made their way back to the coop, their feet dragging as they neared the spot where the body lay. Are we really going back in there? Ettie asked. We have to, Elsa-May replied, though she didn't sound entirely convinced herself. They stepped inside, their eyes scanning each corner of the co-op. Ettie lifted clumps of straw, but there was no sign of Freda. Maybe she went to get help, Ettie suggested. Or maybe something has happened to her, Elsa-May replied grimly. I don't like this. What if we're next? Perhaps we should go back to the barn and hide. Oh, Ettie, why did you hang up on that operator? Ettie didn't answer, but with Freda missing and a dead body in the coop, they were in way over their heads. Chapter 4. Elsa-May and Ettie stood frozen, still trying to wrap their heads around the fact that they had found a man dead under a pile of hay. The silence in the coop was overwhelming, broken only by the occasional cluck from the chickens. They didn't have much time to process it, before they heard the distant sound of sirens. Elsa-May, Ettie whispered, her voice trembling. What if Freda's gone for good? Don't talk like that, Elsa-May snapped. She must be around here somewhere. Maybe she's hiding because she's scared. Ettie sighed. There's nowhere to hide. She's hiding somewhere else. Now let's get away so we're not accused of muddying a crime scene. The co-op door swung open suddenly, making both sisters jump. 2 paramedics hurried inside, their serious expressions only adding to the tense atmosphere. Behind them, a police officer followed, clipboard in hand. You found the body? The officer asked, glancing between Elsa-May and Ettie. Elsa-May nodded. Yes, we didn't know what to do. We tried checking his pulse, but... We'll take it from here, one of the paramedics said kindly, moving past them to examine the body. Ettie stepped back, her hands still shaking. As they watched the paramedics work, another familiar figure entered the coop, Detective Kelly, Well, 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 Kelly said, shaking his head. What are you two doing here, with another dead body? Ettie forced a weak smile. It's not like we plan these things, Detective Kelly. Kelly raised his eyebrows. Maybe not, but you sure have a knack for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Don't I know it, Elsa-May muttered, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The paramedics finished their examination, one of them standing up and turning to Kelly. He's dead, Detective. No pulse. Looks like he's been here for a couple of hours at least. Kelly's face grew more serious as he nodded. We'll need to start investigating right away. He turned to the sisters. Whose place is this? They were both silent, unsure of what to say. He frowned at them. It's not a trick question. You are here, so I'm assuming you know the people who live here. Did the victim live here? Ettie and Elsa-May shook their heads, then finally Elsa-May said. Our friend Freda lives here and we don't know the dead man. Yes, but we can't find Freda, Ettie added. He reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a notepad and pen. Freda, last name? Freda Fisher, Elsa-May told him. And when did you last see her? Elsa-May swallowed hard, knowing how suspicious it all looked. This morning. Kelly looked up at her. Just this morning? The sisters nodded. Then where is she? Elsa-May proceeded to tell him exactly what happened to her, then added, We thought she'd just gone to gather eggs, but she disappeared. Kelly raised an eyebrow. Disappeared, huh? That's slightly odd, don't you think? We know, Ettie added. We thought she might have seen the dead man and then got frightened. Yes, that's right. It can be frightening to find a dead body, Elsa-May said. Kelly sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. All right, I'll get the area searched. We need to find out where Freda is, and fast. We've got a lot of questions for her. We have to find Freda, Elsa-May whispered, clutching her sister's arm. What if she's in danger? Eddie's eyes darted around the co-op nervously. And what if she's, We're not jumping to conclusions. Let's wait and see what the police find. Kelly turned back to the sisters. You two should go inside the house. Stay out of the way and let us handle this. I'll come back to you in a few minutes. But neither Ettie nor Elsa-May moved. We want to help, Elsa-May said. Kelly sighed. I know you do. But right now the best way you can help is by staying safe and letting us do our job. Reluctantly, the sisters agreed and walked back toward Freda's house. What do you think happened? Ettie asked in a low voice. I don't know, Elsa-May replied, her brow furrowed. But something is very, very wrong here. As they stepped back inside the house, Ettie suddenly stopped in her tracks. Oh, Elsa-May, my heart. It's racing. That's not normal. I think I'm having an episode. Chapter 5. Elsa-May brushed off her sister's concerns. That's only normal. We've both had a fright. Ettie moved beyond Elsa-May and raced to sit in a chair. No, it's not normal. What if I'm having a heart attack? It's going boom, boom, boom. I can feel it. Elsa-May narrowed her eyes at her. Are you in pain? Not yet. Ettie put her hand over her heart. I want a simple funeral. Don't worry, that's what you'll be getting. Ettie frowned at her sister. You know that's not what I meant. I don't want anyone to be sad. Elsa-May didn't respond right away. She was too busy snooping around Freda's house. What are you doing? Ettie asked finally. I'm looking for clues to see if I can find out anything about the dead man. I'm dying and that's all you're thinking about? That man's dead and I might be next, so worry about me. Stop it, Ettie. You're fine. I'm telling you I'm not. I think it's my blood pressure. It must be through the roof. Elsa-May looked up at the ceiling. No. The roof is still on the house. You'll be sorry when I'm dead, Ettie said quietly. Look, I'm the one with the high blood pressure. Well, I've got it now. I probably caught it from you, so that makes it your fault. Elsa-May sighed. It doesn't work like that. How do you know? I won't go to a doctor. I'll get one of those blood pressure machines. Then I can take my own. I've always been a do-it-yourself kind of a person. If that will make you feel better, we can do that. Tank. Then Ettie put her fingers on her wrist to see how fast her pulse was. Elsa-May looked over and shook her head. Still alive? Ettie frowned at her. Don't joke about it. Several minutes later, Detective Kelly walked back into Freda's house. His expression was as neutral as ever. Chapter 6. Any news on Freda? Ettie asked. Kelly shook his head, lowering himself into one of the chairs across from them. Not yet. We're still searching. Officers are knocking on doors at neighboring properties. We hope to know something soon. Elsa-May twisted her hands in her lap. What about the man? Do you know who he is yet? Kelly sighed, his brow furrowing slightly. No ID on him. We'll run his fingerprints, but it might take some time to get anything back. For now, he's still a John Doe. The sisters sat in silence for a moment, and Kelly leaned back in a chair, crossing his arms. Tell me about Freda. What do you know about her? Anything out of the ordinary lately? Ettie straightened up, eager to contribute. Well, we've known Freda all our lives. We grew up with her. She's always been a bit of a quiet one, never married, never had much family. But she's got her chickens and she loves those chickens. Elsa-May nodded in agreement. She raises them for shows, you know. They're prize-winning chickens. And not just the chickens, her eggs too. The biggest, brightest eggs you've ever seen. The detective raised an eyebrow. Eggs? You mean like for cooking? Yes, cooking eggs, Ettie said, wondering what other kinds of eggs there could be. Elsa-May beamed. Freda's eggs are practically famous around here. You've never had eggs like hers. They're perfect for everything. We've made the fluffiest omelets and the creamiest custards. Delicious. Ettie chimed in, her enthusiasm matching her sister's. And don't forget the pickled beet eggs, Elsa-May. Do you remember the time Freda gave us a dozen eggs for that bake sale? We made the most delightful egg casserole. Everyone who had some was raving about it for weeks. Kelly's serious expression softened slightly as he listened to them, clearly amused. So Freda's chickens and eggs are a big deal, eh? Elsa-May laughed. A very big deal. Freda even puts her eggs in competition sometimes too, just the eggs. And they win. You wouldn't believe it, unless you saw it for yourself. She's got boxes full of ribbons and trophies from the county fairs. The detective chuckled. Prize-winning eggs? That's something you don't hear every day. Ettie leaned forward. But you see, Freda's never been one to brag. She just quietly goes about her life with her chickens and her eggs. She doesn't have much, but she's content with what she has. Never made enemies, as far as we know. Elsa-May nodded. And she's always been generous with her eggs. Anyone who stops by her place is bound to leave with a dozen or two free of charge. Kelly considered this, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. So, no recent drama in her life? No one who might have been upset with her? Nothing unusual? Both sisters shook their heads. Freda's as steady as they come, Elsa-May said. We were just over here the other day for tea, and everything seemed perfectly normal. Ettie glanced at her sister. Well, she was acting a bit odd when we asked about the eggs earlier today. Remember Elsa-May? She got all flustered when we offered to help gather some. Kelly leaned forward, his eyebrows raised. Nervous how? Ettie frowned, trying to recall. She didn't want us near the co-op. That's not like her. Usually, she loves showing off her chickens. But today she rushed off and insisted we stay in the house and make tea. The detective nodded slowly, processing the information. And then you found the man in the coop. Both sisters nodded solemnly. When she didn't come back, naturally, we had to go find her. Kelly exhaled deeply. We'll keep looking for Freda. Think about things overnight, and then come to the station tomorrow and I'll take your statement. Something might come to you if you think hard. Meanwhile, I'll have one of the officers take you home. No thank you, Ettie said. We need to go to the store before we go home. He stared from Ettie to Elsa-May. Are you sure? I thought you might have been in a bit of shock with everything that's happened. That's exactly why we need to go to the store. Ettie needs to get a medical thing, Elsa-May explained. Kelly stared at Ettie. I hope everything's okay, Mrs. Smith. Ettie nodded. So do I. Well, I'll see you both tomorrow. Is mid-morning okay with the both of you? We'll be there. God willing, Ettie said. Oh, and don't touch anything in here from now on. We'll be taping off the house soon if we don't find Freda Fisher in the next hour or so. When Kelly walked out the door, the house was eerily quiet. Ettie leaned toward her sister, whispering, Do you think Freda's in danger or something? Elsa-May bit her lip, her brows furrowed in thought. I don't know, Ettie. But something's not right. Where is she? I just hope she's alive. Ettie and Elsa-May got up and stood by the window, peeking through the curtains. Outside, the men in white forensic suits were swarming Freda's chicken coop, examining every inch of the crime scene with painstaking precision. Their gloved hands poked around, placing tiny markers on the ground, collecting things in plastic bags. Look at them. Touching everything like they have Freda's okay. Elsa-May crossed her arms. They better not hurt Freda's chickens. I won't forgive them if they stress those poor hens. As if on cue, one of the forensic men gingerly picked up a hen, placing it into a small cage. Elsa-May gasped. They're caging them. Freda's chickens aren't used to small cages. They've got that spacious co-op that's bigger than this house. Oh, this is just awful. Ettie put a hand on her sister's arm, trying to calm her down. I think they're just clearing them out of the way so they can have a good look. It's just temporary, I'm sure. The sisters watched as the men methodically placed the chickens in cages, making careful notes about each one. Every so often, one of the men would pause, glance back at the coop, and then continue his work. Finally, Detective Kelly walked out of the coop, got into his car, and drove off. Once he was gone, Elsa-May turned to Ettie. We've got to get out of here, Ettie. I can't take sitting around doing nothing, worrying about Freda. Ettie nodded in agreement. You're right. I think it's time we did something about this blood pressure situation of mine. Elsa-May raised an eyebrow. You and your imagination, Ettie. But fine, let's go to the drugstore and see what we can find. Maybe it'll distract us. The sisters walked over to the phone, and Ettie dialed for a taxi, tapping her foot impatiently as she waited for someone to pick up. After confirming their location, they waited down by the road. Chapter 7. Once at the pharmacy, the bell above the door gave a cheerful jingle as they entered. They made a beeline for the health section, where Ettie scanned the shelves until her eyes landed on the blood pressure monitors. There they are, Ettie said, pointing excitedly. Elsa-May rolled her eyes, but followed her sister over to the display. A store clerk approached with a helpful smile. Need some assistance, ladies? He asked. Elsa-May held up one of the boxes. Yes, we need to know how this thing works. My sister here is worried about her blood pressure. The clerk chuckled softly. It's pretty straightforward. You wrap the cuff around your upper arm, press this button here, and the machine will do the rest. It'll give you your systolic and diastolic readings, as well as your heart rate. Ettie nodded, trying to look as though she understood every word. Right. Wrap it, press the button, and readings. The clerk smiled patiently. Exactly. Perfect, Ettie said, satisfied. I'll take it. As they moved toward the register, Eddie's eyes caught something else, an oversized magnifying glass sitting near the counter. Her eyes lit up and she grabbed it, holding it in the air. Look at this, Elsa-May. This'll be perfect for examining the fine print on things. Elsa-May raised an eyebrow but didn't protest. Sure, Ettie. Whatever keeps your mind busy. Ettie paid for both the blood pressure machine and the magnifying glass. As they left the store, Ettie clutched her new purchases with a sense of determination. You know, Ettie said as they got back into a taxi, I've got a feeling this magnifying glass will come in handy. For reading labels or finding clues in chicken coops? Elsa-May teased. Ettie gave her sister a sideways glance. Maybe both. Once at home, Ettie sat down on the couch, fiddling with the blood pressure machine she'd just pulled out of the box. The instructions looked simple enough, but she was still nervous. As she adjusted the cuff on her arm, she noticed their cat, Kelly, eyeing the empty box with interest. In typical cat fashion, Kelly attempted to hop into the too small box, curling her body in awkward angles trying to make it fit. Ettie and Elsa-May exchanged amused glances, both chuckling at the sight. She always has to be the center of attention, doesn't she? Elsa-May said, shaking her head with a smile. Every single time, Ettie agreed, laughing. And look at her. She can't even fit, but that doesn't stop her. Kelly gave up on fitting into the box and hopped out, sitting on her haunches to lick a paw in her usual graceful, nonchalant way. But before long, Snowy bounded into the room, snatched the box in his mouth, and gleefully trotted off toward his bed by the fireplace. Oh no, not the box! Ettie cried in mock dismay, watching Snowy shake the box, pieces flying everywhere as he began ripping it apart with great enthusiasm. Let him have it, Elsa-May said, laughing. Better the box than your slippers. Ettie nodded, still grinning, and turned her attention back to the machine. After reading the instructions once more, she sat up straight, adjusted the cuff around her upper arm and took a couple of deep breaths. Here goes, she murmured. The machine whirred to life, the cuff inflating around her arm, squeezing tighter and tighter until Ettie was convinced her arm would fall off. She grimaced but kept quiet, waiting for the pressure to release. After a few moments, the machine emitted a series of loud, irritating beeps, making Elsa-May jump. Turn that off, she groaned, waving her free hand toward Ettie. Ettie quickly reached over, pressing a button to silence the machine. There, no more beeping. Now let's see, she said, leaning in to check the display. Elsa-May leaned over her shoulder. You're fine, she said. In fact, you've got a perfect blood pressure reading. Ettie blinked in surprise. Are you sure? I was certain something was wrong. Nope, nothing wrong at all. You're as healthy as a horse. I told you so. Relief washed over Ettie. She hadn't realized just how much the fear of something being wrong had been gnawing at her. Now that she knew she was fine, she felt lighter. Well, thank goodness, she said, unstrapping the cuff from her arm and setting the machine down on the coffee table. I was half expecting it would be sky high. Don't be so dramatic. Now come on. Let's have supper before we both end up starving. The sisters made their way to the kitchen, where they sat down to a simple but hearty meal of chicken pot pie and mashed potatoes, one of their favorite comfort foods. As they ate, they chatted lightly about Freda, about the chickens, and even about Kelly's antics with the box earlier. By the time supper was over, Ettie felt calmer, her earlier tension a distant memory. The evening wore on, and soon they were settled, Elsa-May with her knitting and Ettie reading the instructions for the blood pressure machine. Snowy and Kelly were curled up in their respective spots by the fire. But as the night grew darker, Ettie's thoughts started drifting back to her health. What if the machine had been wrong? What if her blood pressure had spiked later? The nagging doubts wouldn't leave her alone. Finally, unable to shake the feeling, Ettie stood up. What are you doing now? Elsa-May asked, looking up from her knitting. I'm going to check my blood pressure again, Ettie said, marching toward the machine with determination. Elsa-May sighed but didn't argue. All right, but if it says you're fine again, you have to relax. Ettie sat down, strapped on the cuff once more and let the machine do its work. The familiar squeezing sensation gripped her arm, followed by another round of beeping as the results popped up on the screen. Ettie looked at the numbers, then over at Elsa-May. It's fine again. Oh no, it's lower than last time. So I have low blood pressure? That could be just as bad. I knew there was something wrong. Elsa-May got up and looked over at the screen. Nonsense. It's slightly lower and that's normal. It goes down slightly at night. Are you sure? Yes. Told you there's nothing wrong. Now, can we forget about that stupid machine now? Ettie wasn't so sure. But you just said it doesn't stay the same. So it goes up and down during the day, right? Only slight variations. Well, how do you know that? Ettie asked. Elsa-May looked over the top of her knitting glasses. That's what I was told by the doctor. Well, they can't know everything. No one can know everything. Elsa-May set down her knitting. Ettie, sometimes I think you enjoy finding things to worry about. Do you want to be ill, is that it? Ettie sighed, rubbing her arm where the cuff had squeezed it moments earlier. No, but it's better to be sure than to regret not checking. Elsa-May chuckled softly. Okay, but just for tonight, no more checking your blood pressure or convincing yourself something's wrong, okay? Ettie thought for a moment, then gave a reluctant nod. All right. No more tonight. As the minutes passed, the peacefulness of the evening began to soothe Ettie's lingering anxieties. She glanced over at Elsa-May, who was fully absorbed in her knitting. Ettie broke the silence. Well, I might be all right for now, but where is Freda? Hopefully she's been found. We're going to see Kelly tomorrow, and he might have some good news for us. Ettie gave a nod. I hope so. Chapter 8. The next morning, Ettie and Elsa-May were just about to leave the house when Elsa-May noticed her sister was carrying a rather large bag. Ettie, why are you bringing that? You haven't got the cat in there, have you? Ettie glanced over at Kelly, asleep on the couch. No, of course not. I've just got a few necessities. Nothing much. Elsa-May put her hands on her hips. Tell me what's in there. Well, if you must know, it's my little blood pressure monitor machine. It's not so little. Why are you bringing that with you? If you're worried, just take your blood pressure again when you get home. I've decided to monitor my blood pressure hourly to see how much it changes. You know, to see if your doctor is right. Elsa-May rolled her eyes. You're really doing this, aren't you? Of course. We're already late, Elsa-May said with a sigh, pulling open the front door. Let's go before you find something else to worry about, or find something else you want to take with you. The sisters set off, making their way to the police station for their follow-up meeting with Detective Kelly. The cool morning air was refreshing, but Ettie's anxious fidgeting didn't go unnoticed by Elsa-May. They arrived at the station, and were quickly escorted to Kelly's office. They sat down, and the detective leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as if he hadn't slept in weeks. Morning, ladies, he greeted them with a tired smile. Any news about Freda? Elsa-May asked. Kelly shook his head. We've been searching, knocking on doors, but no one's seen her. It is disturbing. Ettie and Elsa-May exchanged worried glances. We'll ask around our community members today to see if anyone's seen her. That would be appreciated. There's something else, Kelly continued, sitting up straighter. We've identified the victim. He was an escaped felon. He broke out of prison about a week ago. Ettie's eyes widened. He escaped from prison? Yes. He was doing a life term, Kelly confirmed. And from what we've gathered, he was dangerous. He ruffled a few feathers so he'd have people after him. Ettie stared at Elsa-May, hoping she wouldn't make a comment about feathers and chickens, seeing he was found in a chicken coop. Her lips twitched as though she was thinking about it, so Ettie spoke before her. But what would he be doing in Freda's chicken coop? Hiding? Elsa-May suggested. That's what we're trying to figure out, Kelly said, leaning forward on his desk. And with Freda missing. He let the sentence hang in the air, and a heavy silence fell over the room. Do you remember anything else? Anything at all that might help us piece this together? Kelly asked. Ettie and Elsa-May shook their heads. No, nothing, Elsa-May said quietly. We've been thinking about it, but it was all so confusing. Kelly sighed. All right. If you think of anything, let me know. Once they were outside the station, Ettie put her hand on her chest. I'm not sure my heart is feeling right, she murmured. Elsa-May shot her a look. Not now, Ettie. We've got other things to worry about. But, Ettie started. No buts. We need to eat. Let's head to the cafe. Some coffee and cake will fix you right up. Ettie kept a firm grip on her bag as she walked to the cafe. Chapter 9. Once they were inside the coffee shop, Elsa-May led Ettie to a corner table and they sat down. The familiar smell of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods filled the air, and for a moment some of the tension melted away. I'm telling you, Elsa-May said as she glanced over the menu, there's nothing a good slice of cake and some coffee won't fix. Ettie sighed, still looking down at her bag, but she couldn't argue with that. Maybe you're right. Of course I'm right, Elsa-May said with a smile. Now, how about we split a slice of the lemon drizzle cake? That's always your favorite. Why don't you have a look at the display before you make up your mind? That's what we normally do. Elsa-May chuckled. It's too tempting. Then I'd want one of everything. Ettie's lips twitched into a small smile. Okay. We can share something just this once. The sisters placed their order, and as they waited, they chatted lightly about the cafe, the cozy atmosphere, and how they needed a break from the day's events. Despite everything that had happened, and everything that was still unknown, there was something comforting about sharing a quiet moment in the middle of the chaos. As their coffees and cake arrived, Elsa-May handed Ettie a fork. Let's dig in. Ettie took a bite, and as the cake's sweet tart flavor melted on her tongue, she finally felt herself relax. Just as Elsa-May was about to take a sip of coffee, she noticed Ettie rummaging through her large bag. Don't tell me. Elsa-May began, her voice filled with exasperation. Ettie pulled out her blood pressure machine, a notepad and a pen, and set them on the table in front of her. Ettie, you're not seriously going to? But before Elsa-May could finish, Ettie was already strapping the cuff to her arm. I am, Ettie replied, straightening up in her seat. I told you, I'm monitoring my blood pressure today. Every hour. Elsa-May groaned and slumped back in her chair, trying to make herself as small as possible. We're in a cafe, Ettie. People are staring. And sure enough, as the machine started squeezing Eddie's arm, a few people at the surrounding tables were casting sideways glances, some whispering to each other. Elsa-May's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but Ettie didn't seem to notice or care. Let them stare, Ettie muttered, her eyes focused on the numbers flashing on the machine. Elsa-May glanced around, offering an apologetic smile to anyone looking their way, before leaning in to whisper harshly, Can't this wait until we're home? No. I need accurate readings so I can see what's going on. I thought you'd care more, but I can see you care more about cake. As the machine finally beeped announcing its reading, Ettie jotted the numbers down in her notepad with a satisfied nod. There, he said triumphantly, it's still fine. But we'll see if it stays that way. Elsa-May shook her head. You're unbelievable, Ettie. Absolutely unbelievable. Thank you. Now I've been thinking about something. When Freda arrived at her house, she said she was coming back from town. What if she was getting something for that man? And if she was getting something she couldn't get it out because we were there. It might still be in Freda's buggy. Ettie gave a nod. And I don't think the police have checked her buggy. They certainly didn't do it while we were there yesterday. That means we'll need to look in her buggy when we feed the chickens. Elsa-May had a mouthful of coffee. And you know what else I have in my bag that will help us? What? Elsa-May asked. Ettie pulled out her oversized magnifying glass, put it up to her eye, looking at Elsa-May. All Elsa-May saw was Eddie's large blue eye staring back at her, and couldn't help but laugh. Oh, Ettie, you can put that away too. At that moment, the door of the cafe swung open, and in rushed Maggie Overberg, the biggest gossip and know-it-all in their community. Ettie was pleased to see her this time, because if anyone knew where Freda was, it would be Maggie. Chapter 10. Hello, Ettie and Elsa-May, Maggie exclaimed, plopping down in the seat beside Elsa-May without waiting for an invitation. I saw all the police cars outside Freda's place yesterday, and now she's not home. What happened? I asked the police, and they didn't tell me a thing. Ettie exchanged a quick glance with Elsa-May. They knew Maggie wouldn't let up until she got the entire story, so there was no use trying to avoid it. We found a man in Freda's chicken coop dead. Maggie's eyes widened, her mouth dropping open. A man? In the chicken coop? Dead? Yes, Elsa-May confirmed. We didn't recognize him, and we haven't seen Freda since. Maggie clutched her chest dramatically. I can't believe it. Poor Freda. Do you think she's okay? Could she be dead? Or wait, do they think she killed the man? Ettie shook her head and then said, No, but we won't know anything until we find her. We were hoping you might have seen her. Maggie shook her head, her brows knitting together. I haven't seen her in a few days. But I knew something was up the minute I saw all those people. It's all over the community now. Everyone's talking about it, but no one knows a thing. Just as Ettie was about to take another sip of her coffee, Maggie's gaze zeroed in on the blood pressure machine that Ettie had placed on the table beside her cup. What's that? Maggie asked, pointing to the device. Elsa-May shifted uncomfortably. It's a blood pressure machine. Put it away, Ettie. Maggie's eyes lit up with curiosity. A blood pressure machine. Oh, I've always wanted to know what mine is. Without waiting for an invitation, she rolled up her sleeve and thrust her arm toward Ettie. Do mine, would you? Elsa-May's face flushed with embarrassment. Ettie could feel her sister's discomfort radiating from across the table. Maggie, I don't think, Elsa-May started, but Maggie wasn't having it. Oh, come on. It'll only take a minute, Maggie insisted, practically shoving her arm into the cuff. Ettie strapped the cuff onto Maggie's arm and pressed the start button. The machine whirred to life, the cuff inflating with a loud hiss. Elsa-May leaned in and whispered, I can't believe you're doing this here again. The machine beeped loudly, and suddenly it emitted an obnoxious beeping sound that echoed throughout the small cafe. Everyone in the room turned to stare at them. Oh dear, Elsa-May muttered, her face turning bright red. She reached over and started pressing random buttons on the machine, trying to stop the noise. It must be faulty. I can't shut it off. Ettie batted away Elsa-May's hand. Stop it. You'll break it. What's it saying? Am I okay, Ettie? Finally, the beeping stopped, and Ettie removed the cuff from Maggie's arm. You're fine, Maggie. Nothing to worry about. Your reading is average. Oh. Maggie let out a dramatic sigh of relief, placing her hand over her heart. Well, thank goodness for that. In this case, I suppose average is good. What was the exact reading, Ettie? Ettie was busy putting the machine away. Oh, I don't recall now, but it was middling. Maggie frowned. Ettie means middling is good. To Ettie, it's another way of saying average. Ettie sat up straight, folding her arms. I'm sure Maggie can figure that out. I'm not speaking in a foreign language. Elsa-May, still red with embarrassment, glared back at Ettie. Can we please get out of here before we cause any more of a scene? Well, where are you going now? Maggie asked, helping herself to the last morsel of cake. We're going around asking people if they've seen Freda, Elsa-May told her. Well, why didn't you say so? I'll drive you. We can cover more ground in my horse and buggy than you walking around. Ettie blinked. Oh well, we weren't? Nonsense. Maggie cut in. It's settled. I'll take you. You'll be much faster with me taking you and cheaper than those taxis you take all the time. I don't know how you can afford it. It works out less than us keeping a horse and buggy, and we don't go out much. Elsa-May groaned softly under her breath, but before either sister could protest, Maggie had already jumped to her feet and was heading for the door. Come on. We've got to find Freda. Ettie shot a glance at Elsa-May. Well, Ettie said with a smile, it looks like we have a ride. Elsa-May took a deep breath. This is going to be a long day. Now I'm regretting sharing that cake. We should have had one each for energy. Maggie took a step back inside. We can wait for you to have another piece of cake, Elsa-May. And while you're at it, Ettie could take your blood pressure. No need. I can already tell it's higher than it was a moment ago. Elsa-May looked around, and just as she thought, everyone was staring at them. She got to her feet. The sisters followed Maggie out of the cafe, with Elsa-May moving the fastest. Chapter 11. As they all squeezed into Maggie's buggy, Elsa-May suddenly slapped her forehead. Oh no, Ettie. We were supposed to check Freda's buggy for clues. Maggie tilted her head curiously, guiding the horse down the road. Clues? What clues? Elsa-May turned to face her. Well, we were at Freda's house when everything started happening. She had just pulled up like she'd been out, which is unusual for her. You know how Freda rarely goes anywhere. Ettie nodded in agreement. If she was hiding that escaped criminal in her chicken coop, maybe he sent her out to get something. Maggie gasped so loudly that it startled the horse. Escaped criminal? Ettie blinked. Oh. Did we forget to mention that part? Yes. Maggie exclaimed, looking like she'd just swallowed a fly. You never said anything about an escaped criminal. Well, Elsa-May shrugged, it's true. Maggie's eyes went wide as saucers. Well then, that changes everything. We'll have to go to Freda's house first. I just hope the police are gone by now. Ettie gave her a weak smile. So do we. The buggy bumped along the dirt road, the rhythmic clip-clop of the horse's hooves filling the air. Ettie's mind raced as she replayed the events of the last day. What if Freda had been forced into this mess? It wasn't like her to disappear when that meant leaving her chickens. They arrived at Freda's house to find the crime scene tape still stretched across the front yard. Yellow ribbons fluttered in the breeze, marking the perimeter of where the police had been investigating. Ettie squinted, trying to see if anyone was still there. Well, it looks like they're gone, Maggie said, peering over the tape. But that tape's still up. Think it's okay to go in? Elsa-May looked hesitant. I don't know, maybe we shouldn't interfere. Ettie sighed, glancing at the tape. We don't need to interfere. We're just going to look around, check her buggy, see if there's anything out of place. It's not like we're touching anything the police would need. Maggie grinned, already hopping down from the buggy. Good enough for me. Let's go, girls. Ettie and Elsa-May exchanged a look before they both followed Maggie toward Freda's buggy, parked neatly under the shade of an old oak tree. The dusty buggy looked untouched, but that didn't mean there weren't any secrets hiding inside. Maggie marched ahead and reached for the door handle. Let's see what Freda was up to. She tugged at the door and it creaked open. The smell of hay and chicken feed hit them immediately. Elsa-May scrunched up her nose. Smells like Freda's buggy, all right. Ettie peered inside, her eyes scanning the interior for anything out of the ordinary. I don't see anything obvious, do you? Maggie leaned in, inspecting the back seat like a detective on a mission. No, but oh wait. She reached down, picking up a crumpled piece of paper from the floor. What's this? Elsa-May's eyes widened. What does it say? Maggie unfolded the paper carefully. Looks like a list, she murmured. Chicken feed, flour, butter, and wait, what's this? Rope? Ettie and Elsa-May looked at each other. Why would Freda need rope? Elsa-May asked, frowning. And why would it be on a list with basic supplies? Ettie felt a knot form in her stomach. Maybe the escaped criminal needed it for something. Maggie's face lit up with the excitement of a new theory. I bet he made Freda buy it. Maybe he needed it to tie something down, or someone. Elsa-May shot her a skeptical look. Let's not jump to conclusions. Before they could speculate further, they heard the crunch of gravel behind them. Ettie's heart jumped into her throat, but when she turned it was only one of the neighbors walking their dog. Well, thank goodness, she muttered under her breath. For a second, I thought it was the police coming back to arrest us for messing with their crime scene. Maggie laughed, still clutching the list like it was a prized treasure. We're not messing with anything. We're just good neighbors trying to help. Good neighbors don't usually snoop in each other's buggies, Elsa-May pointed out. Well, in this case, I think we can make an exception, Maggie replied. She folded the list and Ettie promptly took it from her. We'll show this to Kelly later. Maybe it'll help. Elsa-May sighed. I hope Freda's okay. Me too, Ettie. Me too. Let's see if the horse is okay. Ettie and Elsa-May followed Maggie into the small paddock where Freda's horse grazed contentedly, tail swishing lazily against the few flies brave enough to bother him. The tall grass seemed enough to keep him happy for a while, but Elsa-May worried about how long it had been since he'd had a proper feed. Poor thing. He doesn't know what's going on, does he? Ettie said, gazing at the chestnut horse. Well, he can't live on grass alone. Maggie went straight for the feed room. She hauled a bucket of grain and dumped it into the feed trough with a loud clang. The horse's ears pricked up, and he eagerly ambled over to munch away. Elsa-May stared at the horse. Who's going to take care of him while Freda's gone? We can't just leave him here. I'll do it, Maggie volunteered without hesitation. I live the closest, and I don't mind stopping by twice a day to check on him and feed him. Ettie gave her a grateful nod. Thanks, Maggie. Freda will appreciate that when she gets back. After watching the horse for a few more moments, they moved back toward Freda's buggy. The door was still open from earlier, so Ettie closed it and then opened the back door. Scanning the interior, her eyes landed on something that made her stop in her tracks. It was a shopping bag. She picked it up and found men's clothing. They had been neatly folded, and they still had their shopping tags showing the prices. Hey, look at this. She held them up for the two women to see. Why would Freda have men's clothes? Elsa-May asked, reaching out to touch the tough fabric of the shirt. She never mentioned anyone staying with her, so who might these be for? Ettie looked into the bottom of the bag and found a receipt. She handed the clothes to Elsa-May so she could read it. These were bought just recently. They have the tags on them. Maggie's brows knitted together. That's odd. What would she be doing buying men's clothes? Ettie shrugged, not knowing what to make of it. Maybe it's for someone she knows? Elsa-May reached further into the buggy and came out holding a box of donuts. Well, at least she might have bought these for herself, she said, grinning as she opened the box. And it would be rude to let them go to waste. Elsa-May took one of the sugar-dusted treats and took a hearty bite. And fresh. Maggie gave her a look. Elsa-May, now's not the time to be eating stale donuts. Ettie shrugged. It's a stressful situation. Donuts might help. Do you think the clothing belonged to the escaped criminal? Maggie asked. Elsa-May looked at Ettie and then said, It's possible. But why would Freda have it in her buggy? Maybe she was hiding him after all, Maggie suggested, her voice dropping to a whisper. Maybe he made her buy these clothes and food for him. You heard what Kelly said, he was an escaped convict. He'd have people looking for him. It could be that Freda didn't want to get involved with the police, Ettie said. Elsa-May bit her lip, looking thoughtful. But if that's true, why wouldn't she go to the police as soon as she could? If she was scared of the man, wouldn't she want their help? She should have gone to the police rather than the store. Unless. Maggie trailed off, a worried expression crossing her face. Unless she knew him and was friends with him. The three of them fell silent for a moment, the weight of that possibility hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Ettie's mind raced. Could Freda really have known the criminal? It seemed unlikely, but then again, she had been acting strangely lately, hadn't she? And now Freda was missing. What if Freda didn't go to the police, because she felt responsible for him? Maybe she thought she could help him, Ettie suggested. Maggie frowned. Or maybe she was too scared to turn him in. He might have threatened to harm her chickens if she didn't do certain things. That's a possibility too, but either way we can't keep this to ourselves. We need to tell Kelly about the clothes and that note too. Elsa-May gave a nod. But won't that make Freda look guilty? What if the police think she was involved in helping him escape? Ettie asked. Maggie crossed her arms, her lips pressing into a thin line. It's better to tell them what we know than to hide it. If Freda's innocent, the truth will come out. But if we withhold information, it could make things worse for her. Ettie nodded slowly, seeing the sense in Maggie's argument. You're right. Besides, hiding an escaped criminal is a crime, isn't it? And so is killing one, Elsa-May added softly. Freda would not have done that. We can't tell Detective Kelly about this, agreed? Ettie said, staring at them until both Elsa-May and Maggie nodded. We'll do what you say, Ettie, Maggie said. Ettie looked down at the clothing. I'm sure there's a perfectly good explanation for all this. Ettie glanced back at the crime scene tape fluttering in the breeze. The sooner we clear this up the better, Elsa-May said. Now we need to have a look in the chicken coop. Ettie put the clothing back where she'd found it, and headed to the co-op. Who usually feeds the chickens while Freda's been away? She went to that wedding a few months ago and was gone for a few days, Maggie said. That would be me, a man's voice rang out from behind them. Chapter 12. Startled, they all spun around to see a tall young man. Who are you? Maggie asked. I'm Martin. Is Freda still missing? Yes. Do you know Freda? Of course. She's showing me how to look after the chickens. I want to have prize winners someday too. They looked the young man up and down. He was an Englisher. Where were you yesterday? Elsa-May asked. I only come here every couple of days. Whenever I can get away from work. Maggie moved in front of him. Well, we don't know about you, so we'll look after everything until Freda comes back. We'll take over the job of feeding the chickens, Elsa-May told him. Wherever she is, she'd want me to help, Martin insisted. Maggie was quick to tell him, well, we don't know that. Then Maggie looked around. If you want to be useful, why don't you chop some of that firewood over there? He looked at the chopping block and the wood and headed over. The three ladies then proceeded to the chicken coop. Before she entered, Ettie took her magnifying glass out of her bag. Ettie squinted through the magnifying glass as she stepped into the chicken coop. The chickens clucked and rustled around her, clearly displeased with the intrusion. Ettie raised the glass, focusing on the uneven ground below. The dirt floor was scattered with footprints of all shapes and sizes, an absolute mess of impressions that told a chaotic story. Maggie and Elsa-May lingered just outside the coop, peering through the chicken wire. What do you expect to find, Ettie? A giant egg? Maggie teased. Ettie gave a small huff, but her focus didn't waver. You never know, Maggie. Sometimes it's the smallest detail that solves the biggest mystery. Well, I hope it's small enough to fit in that magnifying glass of yours. Elsa-May chuckled. Ettie scanned the ground inch by inch. She paused when she found a cluster of smudged impressions, most likely made by the officers. Some prints were deeper than others, suggesting a mix of lighter and heavier men. But Ettie wasn't just looking for prints, she was searching for something out of the ordinary. A misplaced feather, an unusual object, anything that didn't belong. It's hopeless, Elsa-May sighed, folding her arms. The police have stomped all over everything. You'll never tell one print from another. Ettie straightened up a little and glanced over her shoulder. You're right, Elsa-May. But that doesn't mean we can't try to piece things together. We already know the victim was tall. Judging by the footprints, it seems like everyone else who's been here was of average size. So it's likely his prints were trampled over. Or maybe he was just light on his feet. Could have been a dancer in another life. Maggie laughed. Highly unlikely, Ettie replied. She crouched lower, bringing her face closer to the dirt. Ettie, don't put your face down there. You'll get something on your nose, Elsa-May warned her. Ettie inched forward, her gaze sharp as she examined a patch of straw and dirt. There was something odd here, an area where the straw seemed to have been deliberately kicked aside. See something yet, Detective Smith? Maggie called. Ettie grunted. That does have a nice ring to it, and maybe. As she continued to examine the space, a few of the chickens gathered curiously nearby, their beady eyes trained on her every move. Ettie paused to peer at them through the magnifying glass, just for fun. The chickens looked unimpressed. You think the chickens know something, Ettie? Maybe they're witnesses. Maggie burst into laughter, clutching her side. Oh yes, Elsa-May. Let's see if Ettie can get one of them to testify. Ettie gave the hens an exaggerated once-over with the magnifying glass, her face stern. No, they won't be able to tell us anything. One of the hens clucked loudly. Now you've gone and hurt their feelings. Elsa-May wiped a tear of laughter from her eye. Ettie couldn't help the smile tugging at her lips. They'll get over it. Chickens are tough like that. The humor was brief though, as Ettie's gaze landed back on the ground. She noticed a small scrap of fabric stuck to a piece of wire near the coop's edge. It was barely visible beneath the hay, but it was there, a dark torn piece of material. Hold on, Ettie said, leaning closer to inspect it. What is it? Elsa-May asked, her voice suddenly serious. It's a piece of cloth, Ettie replied. Could be from the victim's clothing, or maybe from someone else who was in here. Maybe it's just an old rag, Maggie suggested. Or maybe it's not, Ettie shot back. We won't know until we check. With great care, Ettie lifted the scrap of fabric. It was rough to the touch, as if it had been torn in a hurry. The edges were frayed, suggesting that it had snagged on something sharp. Ettie held it up to the light, examining it closely. It's not much, but it's something, Ettie murmured to herself. Well, if we're collecting rags now, we'll be here all day. Maggie turned around when she heard wood being chopped. Ettie stood up to face Maggie and Elsa-May. This might not seem like much, but it could be a clue. If the victim struggled here, this fabric might have come from his clothes. Or if someone else was involved, it could be from their clothing. But what about the clothes in Freda's buggy? Elsa-May asked, her brow furrowed. Maybe this matches those. No. They were new clothes. Maggie sighed, glancing around the cramped, smelly space. What could be so important here anyway? The co-op was where the victim was found, And the last place Freda was seen before she went missing, Ettie reminded them. If there's a clue to what happened to her, it might be here. Ettie then combed through the hay, lifting it with a careful hand and scrutinizing every inch. After what felt like an eternity, Ettie paused, her eyes narrowing. There was something else, another faint impression in the dirt. It wasn't a footprint, but rather a narrow rectangular shape, like the edge of a box or crate. Ettie traced its outline with her finger. "Well, would you look at that?" she muttered. "What is it now?" Elsa-May asked, her patience thinning. "Looks like something heavy was placed here recently," Ettie said. "And it's been moved since." Maggie's eyes widened. "You think it's important?" "It could be," Ettie replied. "It might have been something the victim was trying to hide. Or maybe it's what Freda was trying to protect." Elsa-May shook her head slowly. "This is getting stranger by the minute." Ettie nodded, her eyes still trained on the rectangular impression. "Yes, it is. And I have a feeling we're just scratching the surface." "Ettie, you don't honestly think the police missed something, do you? They've been through here already." "You've got to admire her tenacity," Maggie whispered to Elsa-May, who only rolled her eyes. Then Elsa-May said, "Let's go." "Not yet," Ettie said, continuing to look through the glass. "What exactly are you looking for?" "We found that scrap of rag, so let's go," Elsa-May asked, her arms crossed. "Well, while Ettie's searching for clues, I'll gather some eggs." Maggie found a bucket near the door, and began collecting the large, beautifully speckled eggs Freda's prize-winning chickens were known for. Ettie looked up from her magnifying glass, frowning at Maggie. "Should you be doing that? We don't know when Freda's coming back." "Eggs are eggs, Ettie," Maggie said, shrugging. "Might as well take them while they're fresh." "Oh, I forgot, you like stale things like those donuts." Elsa-May disagreed. "That's different. Ettie and I won't take any. They wouldn't taste the same without Freda around." "Oh, come on. You don't really believe that," Maggie said. Elsa-May crossed her arms tighter. "You can collect them if you want, but I won't eat any of Freda's eggs until she's back safe and sound. I just couldn't." "If she comes back," Maggie muttered under her breath, loud enough for them to hear. Ettie's heart sank a little at that, but she pushed on. She wandered deeper into the coop, holding her magnifying glass near one of the beams. "There's got to be something else here," she mumbled. Maggie picked up a particularly large egg and held it up to the light. "I bet this one's a winner," she said, plopping it into her bucket. "Honestly, Maggie, have some respect," Elsa-May said with a sigh, turning away from the scene. "This is serious. Freda's missing, and you're talking about eggs." Maggie placed her hands on her hips, the bucket of eggs swaying by her side. "Well, what do you expect me to do? Sit around waiting for something to happen? At least this way we're doing something useful." Meanwhile, Ettie had made her way to the far end of the co-op. "There's something odd here," she called, squinting through her glass at a patch of disturbed straw. Elsa-May and Maggie exchanged glances before walking over to see what Ettie had found. "What is it now?" Elsa-May asked, sounding exasperated. Ettie knelt and picked up another small piece of fabric from the straw. "Look at this." Maggie leaned in. "Is that from the man's clothing?" "It looks like it could be." Ettie held it up to the light, her eyes narrowing. "It could be. Or it could be something else entirely. Maybe Freda tore it off when she was trying to?" "To what?" Elsa-May interrupted. "You're jumping to conclusions, Ettie. Let's not make things worse by speculating." "I'm not speculating," Ettie huffed, "I'm investigating." Maggie stood up, dusting off her hands. "Whatever it is, it's clear Freda's been involved in something serious. I hate to say it, but it doesn't look good for her." Elsa-May frowned, clearly torn. "But why didn't Freda go to the police? Why hide all of this? Hiding an escaped criminal, that's serious stuff. And what if something went wrong?" "It did," Elsa-May added quietly. Ettie's magnifying glass hovered over the fabric again, but this time her enthusiasm waned. The reality of the situation was sinking in. Freda could be in real trouble. "We need to take this to the police," Ettie finally said, pocketing the fabric. "They'll know what to do with it." Elsa-May nodded, agreeing reluctantly. "It might be our best option. Freda wouldn't want us keeping this from them, not if it could help find her." And besides, Maggie chimed in, we don't want to make it look like we're hiding anything. Especially if Freda's innocent. Innocent or not, Elsa-May said, her voice soft but firm, hiding an escaped criminal is a crime. And if she was forced into it, we need to clear her name. Ettie turned toward the co-op door, glancing back one last time at the chickens as they clucked softly, completely unaware of the chaos surrounding their peaceful little world. The sooner we get to the bottom of this, Ettie said quietly, the sooner we can bring Freda home. Elsa-May saw a rock wall behind her and sat down. You two feed those chickens and I'll wait here. Once that's done, then we can visit some neighbors and see if they know anything. Maggie frowned at Elsa-May. So no police? I'm confused. Didn't you say you wanted to take those scraps of fabric to them? I've had another think about that. If the forensic team left it here, it wouldn't have been important. What do you think, Ettie? Ettie shrugged. You're probably right. I don't think we've discovered anything here today that would help find Freda. Elsa-May looked over at Martin, and then started walking toward him. He looked up when he saw the three ladies walking toward him. Shall I feed the chickens now? No. We'll do it, Maggie said. Ettie asked, how long have you known Freda? He looked up at the sky as he thought. About a year. I met her at a chicken show, and we started talking. Was she acting any different lately? He shook his head. I don't think so. I can't say I noticed. I'd help her with the chickens, she'd tell me things about them. Then I'd go home. Would you go into her house? Ettie asked. Sometimes she'd invite me in for milk and cookies. Did you see anyone other than Freda while you were here? He shook his head again. Never. She was always here by herself. How much of this do I have to chop? Maggie looked down at the woodpile. That's probably enough. You can go home now. He put the axe down, gave them a nod, and walked down to his pickup truck that was parked on the roadside. Chapter 13. After the chickens were fed, Ettie decided that their next stop had to be Freda's nearest neighbor, Neville, the grumpy junk shop owner. His farm was just beyond the boundary of Freda's property, and although the sisters weren't particularly fond of him from a couple of interactions over the years, they hoped he might have seen something unusual. As they approached Neville's old cluttered store that was built in front of his farmhouse, they could see him standing in the doorway, arms crossed, a scowl already forming on his face. Maggie had chosen to stay in the buggy. Neville squinted at Ettie and Elsa-May as they approached, clearly displeased by the visit. Customers? Neville barked, not even bothering with pleasantries. Not today, Ettie said. Elsa-May smiled at him. We wanted to ask you about Freda, your neighbor. He snorted, his thin lips curling up in distaste. What's Freda got to do with me? Well, we were just over at her place, Ettie interjected, and the police are looking into something. We're trying to figure out what might have happened. Neville leaned against the doorframe, his bony hands gripping the sides as he eyed them suspiciously. So Freda's in trouble now, is she? Not exactly, Elsa-May said, giving Ettie a glance before continuing. She's missing, and no one seems to know where she is. At this, Neville's grumpy demeanor seemed to falter for a moment. He blinked, then scowled even harder. Freda's missing? HMPH. I was told about it by the cops. I don't know anything about that. We don't exactly have tea and scones together. We figured as much, Ettie said with a small chuckle, but you live close by. Maybe you saw something, someone hanging around. Someone suspicious? Neville shifted uncomfortably, looking out at his disheveled yard as if considering whether or not to share. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he grunted. I saw some man hanging around Freda's place the other day. Ettie and Elsa-May exchanged a glance, hearts quickening. What kind of man? Elsa-May pressed. Neville scratched his chin, the bristle of his scraggly beard catching the light. Didn't look like anyone from around here, that's for sure. Scruffy-looking fella. I asked Freda about him, couldn't help it. He looked odd. But she told me to mind my own business. Ettie raised an eyebrow. She told you to mind your own business? Yeah, Neville grumbled, clearly still irked. Said it was no one, and I should stop being nosy. Elsa-May whispered to Ettie. That could be Martin that he saw. How old was this man? A teenager, Ettie inquired. He was older than that. That rules Martin out, Elsa-May murmured. Then she asked, did she seem nervous when you said something about the man? Neville considered this, his face twisting in thought. I dunno if I'd call it nervous, but she was definitely snappier than usual. Told me to leave it alone real quick, like she didn't want me prying. Ettie crossed her arms. None of this makes sense. Neville's eyes narrowed. What are you implying? Do you think I killed her? Elsa-May's mouth fell open. No one said anything about that. Why would you say that? Saw all the police over there. They had to be doing something. She's missing, that's all, Ettie insisted. Yeah, well, that's what they say, but there might be more to it. Neville straightened up, looking much less like the cranky neighbor and more like a man who had been personally offended. She's been bad-mouthing me all over town, he spat out. She's cost me a lot of business with that big mouth of hers, telling folks my stuff's too expensive. So, did you confront her about it? Ettie asked. Of course I did. I told her she was wrong and that I don't overcharge. It's quality stuff in my shop, not junk. But she wouldn't listen. Kept spreading those lies. Ettie eyed him carefully. And what happened then? You didn't get angry enough to hurt her, did you? Neville's face blanched. Hurt her? What are you suggesting? Elsa-May jumped in, trying to calm the situation. We're not suggesting anything, Neville. We're just trying to figure out what happened. Neville stared at them. Where is she? She's missing, Elsa-May said again, emphasizing the word. We don't know anything more yet. We need to get going, Elsa-May said, breaking the silence. Thank you for your time, Neville. Neville nodded. If you find anything out, let me know. I'll lock my doors tonight. Ettie studied him carefully. Didn't the police visit you and tell you what happened? They told me a man had been murdered. Now I know Freda's still missing, that could mean 2 murders. As the sisters walked back to Maggie's buggy, Elsa-May turned to Ettie. What did you make of that? I don't know, Ettie said, frowning. I'm not sure he's telling us everything, but I don't think he's guilty either. Still, it sounds like he saw the man at Freda's house, so Freda must have been helping him. When they climbed back into Maggie's buggy, Maggie asked, well? He saw a strange man at Freda's house, but Freda told him to mind his own business. It can't have been Martin because he said it was an older man, not a teenager, Ettie said. Maggie clicked her tongue. That's not Freda to be rude. Elsa-May glanced at Ettie, her mind racing. No, it isn't. And now we have more questions than answers. Maggie flicked the reins, urging her horse forward. So where to now? Wait, a woman called out. They turned to see a middle-aged woman coming from Neville's place, waving them down. Elsa-May raised an eyebrow at the woman. Now what? Out of breath but with an air of urgency, the woman skidded to a stop beside the buggy. I'm sorry about my brother. I heard everything but I was on the phone and couldn't come out. Look, I don't know if Freda's dead or just missing, but if you're asking around, you might want to talk to Harold Green. Harold Green? Ettie repeated, frowning. Who is he? The woman leaned in closer, as if sharing some great secret. Those two have been at odds for years. Harold always comes in second place to Freda at the local shows. His hens can't compete with hers, and it's been driving him mad for as long as I can remember. How do you know all this? Elsa-May asked. I keep these open, she said, pointing to her ears. People talk. Harold's been muttering about Freda for years. She's cost him plenty of ribbons, and I reckon he'd be happy to see her out of the way. Maggie, who had been quiet up until now, leaned forward in her seat. You think Harold Green could have something to do with Freda disappearing? The woman shrugged. All I'm saying is, if Freda's gone, Harold's probably not shedding any tears over it. Ettie and Elsa-May exchanged a glance. Do you know where we can find him? Ettie asked. Sure do, the woman said, pulling a piece of paper from her pocket and scribbling down some directions. He's got a farm just a few miles from here, on the other side of the creek. I'm Narita, by the way. Maggie introduced herself, and then the other 2 ladies. As they prepared to drive off, Narita called out again, "And hey, just remember, I didn't say anything?" She winked, tapping her nose conspiratorially before turning and heading back toward her brother's junkyard home. Maggie flicked the reins and got the buggy moving. "We're wasting our time," she muttered under her breath. "Freda's not dead, she's just missing. Neville's always been one for wild stories." Ettie turned to her. "It won't hurt to ask a few questions though, will it? Maybe Harold saw something." Elsa-May sighed. "Maybe, but I don't want to go pointing fingers just because Harold's jealous of Freda's hens." "Jealous?" Ettie said, furrowing her brow. "What if he wanted to get rid of the competition once and for all? What if the man Freda was hiding tried to protect her against Harold, and was shot for his trouble? You think Harold Green killed Freda just because she beat him in a few poultry shows? And killed another man who had nothing to do with it? I think that's a bit of a stretch." Elsa-May stared out the buggy window. "Maybe he knows something, even if he didn't do anything to her," Ettie said. Maggie steered the buggy in the direction Narita had given them. The rolling fields passed by in a blur as they rode in silence. When they finally reached Harold Green's farm, they could see a middle-aged man outside, bent over a vegetable patch pulling weeds. Ettie could feel the tension in the air as they pulled up to the fence. The man looked up, wiping the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "What's this then?" he grumbled as they climbed out of the buggy and approached him. "Morning," Ettie said, forcing a smile. "We're looking for Harold." "Well, you found him." Elsa-May moved in front of Ettie. "We're really looking for Freda Fisher. Have you seen her recently?" Harold straightened up, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. "What's Freda got to do with me?" Maggie stepped forward, her hands on her hips. "Rumor has it that you weren't exactly her biggest fan. You didn't see anything odd going on at her place recently, did you?" Harold's face flushed red and he kicked at the dirt, clearly irritated. "Look, Freda and I never saw eye to eye, that's no secret. Her hens always beat mine in the shows, and I didn't like it, but that doesn't mean I had anything to do with her disappearing." Elsa-May raised an eyebrow. "So, you know about her going missing?" Harold crossed his arms and shifted uncomfortably. "Heard it on the news that a man was killed at her house and she's missing." "When did you last see her?" Ettie asked. "A few days ago. I went there to ask if she'd tell me one thing. And that was what she fed her chickens. Of course she wouldn't tell me, and that was that." "While you were there, did you see anyone else?" He looked up at the sky, rubbing his chin. Then he said, "No. I didn't stick around. She didn't invite me in for milk and cookies, if that's what you want to know. So why are you all so interested?" "We're her friends," Elsa-May said. It's good that she had some." Ettie watched Harold closely, noting the way his eyes darted nervously toward his house. "Is there something you're not telling us, Harold?" Harold glared at her. "I already told you everything I know, which is a big fat zero. Now why don't you move on so I can finish this? Unless you know what she feeds her chickens?" The three ladies shook their heads. He got back down and continued pulling out weeds. "Thank you for your time, Harold," Ettie said finally. Harold just grunted. As they climbed back into the buggy, Maggie leaned over and whispered, "That man's hiding something, I can feel it." Ettie nodded, her mind racing with the possibilities. "Everyone's got something to hide. It might be nothing about Freda," Maggie said. Chapter 14. Detective Kelly knocked on the door of Ettie and Elsa-May's house with his usual briskness. As Elsa-May opened it, Kelly stepped inside, dusting rain off his coat. "Evening," he said, nodding at the sisters. Before either of them could respond, Snowy came barreling toward Kelly, barking with enthusiasm. Ettie quickly stepped forward, trying to calm the dog down. "Oh, for goodness sake, Snowy," Ettie scolded. "I'm so sorry. I'll put him in a room." Kelly raised an eyebrow, taking a cautious step back. "Thank you." Ettie picked up the dog and handed it to Elsa-May, who closed him in her bedroom. Once the chaos had settled, Ettie turned back to the detective with a friendly smile. "Would you like some coffee and cake, Detective? It's freshly made." Ettie did it when we got back home this afternoon. She used Freda's eggs. I told her not to, but as usual she never listens to me. Kelly smiled, loosening his coat and taking a seat near the fire. I never say no to cake. Ettie bustled off to the kitchen, and Elsa-May sat down with Detective Kelly. So what brings you out here this evening? Elsa-May asked. Just following up to see if you have heard about Freda. No, we haven't. Moments later, Ettie returned with a plate of cake and steaming cups of coffee. She handed Kelly a slice of chocolate cake and put a coffee cup in front of him. Here you go, Detective. We don't want you wasting away on our watch, Ettie said. Kelly chuckled and took a bite, and after he savored his mouthful he said, This cake's almost worth the trip. So, how's the investigation going? Ettie asked. Kelly leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting slightly. Well, that's why I'm here. I wanted to see if you two had learned anything about Freda's whereabouts. I asked you to find out if any of your community members have seen her. Ettie leaned forward. Well, we did talk to Neville. He's that man with all the junk outside his house on the farm nearest to Freda. He didn't seem too pleased with Freda. Apparently, she's been telling everyone in town that his things are overpriced, and he said it's costing him business. Kelly nodded thoughtfully, but before he could respond, Elsa-May cut in. Maybe he did something to her to get back at her for running her mouth. Ettie nodded enthusiastically. Right. People can be very touchy when it comes to business, with it being their livelihood. Kelly shook his head, brushing off their theory. Freda's missing, not dead. Unless you know something I don't know. Well, we don't know that for sure, Ettie added, crossing her arms. Maybe Neville went after her, and the dead man just got in the way, so he had to kill him too. Kelly sighed, clearly growing weary of their theories. Look, ladies, it's highly unlikely. The man we found was an escaped convict. He's the victim. We're trying to figure out how Freda got involved with him, and why she's missing. Ettie, undeterred, had another name up her sleeve. Then there's Harold Green. Harold Green? Kelly asked. Yeah, the man who always comes second to Freda's chickens in the show, Ettie explained. He's been dying to know what Freda feeds her prize-winning hens for years. Maybe it got too much for him. Jealousy eats away at a person, Elsa-May pointed out. Kelly took a mouthful of coffee, then he placed his coffee cup down, rubbing his temple. We're not talking about a chicken rivalry here. We're looking for Freda because we think she has answers. The dead man, the convict, is the real mystery here, not who or who doesn't win prizes for chickens. The room fell silent for a moment, with only the crackling fire breaking the tension. Ettie picked up the plate of cake. Would you like another slice, Detective Kelly? Kelly shook his head with a smile. I think one's enough, it was very rich. But thank you, Mrs. Smith. It's rich because of Freda's eggs, Elsa-May said. Well, whatever the reason, it was delicious. For now, let's focus on the facts, shall we? We're just worried about where she is. We can't help but fear the worst, Elsa-May told him. I want your focus to be on finding Freda, not jumping to conclusions about murder or sabotage. Perhaps someone in your community is hiding her for some reason. Ask around. Someone must know something. And have you found anything out? Ettie asked. Like, why was that man in this area? The victim? Kelly asked. Ettie nodded. We don't know yet. Elsa-May's eyes opened wide. How was he killed? He was shot. Kelly took a sip of. Did you find the gun? Ettie asked. No. I'd like to find out whether Freda was hiding this man, and possibly against her will. Perhaps he was holding her hostage and she shot him. If that's the case, she can come forward. After Detective Kelly said his piece, Elsa-May looked at Ettie and said, We should tell him what we found in Freda's buggy. What? Kelly asked, staring from one to the other. Ettie frowned at Elsa-May. I wasn't keeping it a secret. You make it sound like I was hiding something. Elsa-May rolled her eyes. Well, it certainly felt like it when you said that telling him won't help Freda. Ettie crossed her arms in irritation. I'm not sure if I said that at all, but anyway, I was just about to mention it to him. Before or after the next cup of coffee? Elsa-May shot back. Ladies. Kelly interrupted. What exactly did you find, Mrs. Smith? Elsa-May exhaled, finally getting to the point. We found men's clothing in the back of Freda's buggy. And some food donuts. I brought the donuts back here, but I'm afraid there aren't many of them left. Kelly stared at her with his lips curving slightly upward. Why's that? I ate them, Elsa-May admitted. I thought as much. Let's go back to the men's clothing. When we got to Freda's the day she went missing, the day the man was found dead, she wasn't home when we first arrived, Ettie said. Elsa-May took over. Yes, and we both thought that was odd because she rarely goes anywhere. But when she finally showed up, she said she had been in town getting supplies. But why would she need men's clothing? Kelly leaned forward. Men's clothing? And donuts? Ettie nodded firmly. That's right. We thought it was strange. Freda doesn't have a man in her life, at least not that we know of. Elsa-May chimed in. Maybe she was hiding that escaped criminal. Kelly looked thoughtful, rubbing his chin. This definitely changes things. If Freda was involved with the man we found, it might explain her disappearance. I'll send my men out first thing in the morning to collect that clothing for evidence. Ettie sighed. We're just so worried about where she is. We fear the worst. I understand your concern, Kelly said. But let's not jump to conclusions. Perhaps someone in your community is hiding her for some reason, or she's gone into hiding herself. I mean, if she had been killed, then we would have found a body. Elsa-May crossed her arms. We've been asking around, but so far no one's seen her. It's strange. Freda doesn't just vanish like this. Kelly set his coffee cup down. I'd appreciate it if you continued asking questions. Maybe someone knows something but hasn't realized it yet. Ettie looked at him with narrowed eyes. And have you found anything? Why was that man near Freda's house in the first place? Kelly shook his head. We don't have all the answers yet. We're still piecing things together. The question is whether Freda was involved in the shooting, or if she's another victim. It's possible the man was holding her hostage. Maybe she shot him to escape. Elsa-May frowned. But wouldn't she have gone to the police if that were the case? Kelly sighed, his brow furrowed in thought. Not necessarily. People can react in strange ways under stress. She may have panicked. The room grew quiet for a moment. Finally, Elsa-May broke the silence. We met Martin too. Martin? Kelly asked. Yes, a teenager that helps Freda with the chickens. He's not there every day. Have you spoken with him? He shook his head. I'll check with my men, but I have not personally spoken to him. Where can I find him? Ettie and Elsa-May looked at each other. Finally, Elsa-May said, Ettie didn't find out where he lived. And neither did you, Ettie shot back. Well, next time you see him, have him call me or go to the station. We do need to talk with everyone. You've done a great job so far by letting me know about this. We do what we can, Elsa-May said. He stood up, brushing crumbs from his pants. Keep asking around the community. Someone might know more than they're letting on. Ettie watched Kelly, her mind still racing with unanswered questions. Do you really think Freda could have been forced into this? Kelly met her gaze and nodded. It's a possibility. But until we know more, we're considering all the angles. Thanks for the coffee and cake, and have a good night, ladies. With that, he gathered his coat. Elsa-May saw him to the door while Ettie sat by the fire and got out her blood pressure machine. Ettie wrapped the cuff around her arm with the efficiency of someone who had done it countless times before. She sat back in her chair, feeling the slight squeeze as the machine started its work. The small display showed rising numbers, mirroring her anxiety. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Elsa-May returned from the front door, watching Ettie with concern. When the machine stopped whirring, she asked, How's it looking? Ettie studied the numbers on the screen. It's high. How high? 1 point higher. Elsa-May chuckled. That's not high. It's higher though. It's to be expected. We had a busy day. Elsa-May nodded in agreement and sank into the chair across from Ettie. We can only do so much tonight, Ettie. Kelly's right, we need to rest and try again tomorrow. Freda needs us to be clear-headed. Ettie removed the cuff and set the machine aside. Freda's out there needing our help. But you're right. We can't do much else tonight. Wherever she is, I hope she's warm and safe." The sisters exchanged a tired smile. "Come on," Elsa-May said gently. "Let's get an early night. Maybe tomorrow will bring better answers." Chapter 15. The next morning over breakfast, Elsa-May put her fork down, giving her sister a curious glance. "What's wrong, Ettie? You're awfully quiet this morning." Ettie tapped her spoon against the side of her teacup, frowning deeply. "I've been thinking. Something just doesn't add up." "What do you mean?" "The victim was a large man, right? You saw him. But the clothes we found in Freda's buggy, they weren't large. They were smaller. They were more of a medium size." Elsa-May paused mid-bite of her toast and looked at her sister in disbelief. "Are you sure? How could you remember that? We only saw the clothes for a moment." Ettie shrugged. "I don't know how I remember, but I do. I was paying attention." Elsa-May set her toast down. "Ettie, you could be mistaken. It was a quick look. The more I think about it, the surer I am that the clothes didn't belong to the man we found. They were for someone else." Elsa-May leaned back in her chair, sighing. "What are you thinking, then?" Eddie's eyes darkened with worry. "I don't know, but something feels off. If those weren't the victim's clothes, then whose are they? And why would Freda be buying men's clothes? More importantly, that would mean that she was not knowingly letting the victim stay with her." "Possibly. Well, we need to feed Freda's chickens anyway, so we'll have another look before Kelly's men show up to take the clothes into evidence." Ettie nodded. "Good idea. Let's head over there as soon as we possibly can." They finished breakfast in relative silence, both mulling over Eddie's concern. After clearing the table, they grabbed their coats and headed out the door. They walked briskly toward the shanty down the road to hail a taxi, with the cold morning air nipping at their cheeks. Half an hour later, the taxi turned onto the familiar dirt road leading to Freda's. They could see the crime scene tape still fluttering in the breeze, but there was no sign of police activity. "We need to be quick," Ettie said quietly as the taxi pulled up a safe distance from the house. "Right," Elsa-May agreed. They paid the driver, and once the taxi pulled away, the sisters hurried toward the buggy, darting between trees to avoid being seen by anyone who might happen to drive by. Their breaths came in puffs of mist in the cold morning air as they reached the buggy, both panting slightly from the rush. "Let's get inside," Ettie said. They got into the buggy, and Elsa-May quickly scanned the area to make sure no one had spotted them. Ettie immediately started rummaging through the buggy, looking for any additional clues. The men's clothing was still there, folded neatly in the back where they had left them. "Anything new?" Elsa-May asked, peering over Eddie's shoulder. "No, just what we saw yesterday," Ettie said, frowning. "I was right. These clothes are far too small for the victim." Elsa-May hesitated, her gaze traveling over the unfolded clothing. "You might be right. But that doesn't tell us anything yet." "Exactly," Ettie said. "But hiding an escaped criminal is a crime," Elsa-May said. "And killing one is too," Ettie added grimly. Elsa-May nodded in agreement. Then Elsa-May grabbed Eddie's arm when she heard a car. "What's that?" Ettie asked. "It's the police. It'll be the ones Kelly sent to take the clothes. They can't find us here. We'll be blamed for touching everything. Quick, Ettie, get in the front." Chapter 16. The two of them somehow managed to get in the front, and they got down low. "Have they seen us?" Ettie whispered. "Not yet, I don't think. But keep quiet until they're gone." As the footsteps grew louder, Eddie's heart raced. The two officers were nearing the buggy, still grumbling about their pointless task. Elsa-May's breathing was shallow beside her, and Ettie could feel her heart racing. She wondered what her blood pressure reading would be right now. As if reading her mind, Elsa-May whispered through clenched teeth, "Don't even think about it." They crouched lower, hidden beneath the buggy's front seat, as the officers stopped just outside. "What do you reckon Kelly's up to with this whole case?" one officer muttered. "You think the old Amish lady's got something to hide?" Ettie shifted slightly, trying to get more comfortable in the cramped position. The buggy wasn't exactly the most spacious hiding spot, and the sound of the officer's boots crunching gravel was enough to set her nerves on edge. "Freda Fisher," the second officer scoffed. "The woman raises chickens for Pete's sake. She's not some criminal mastermind." Ettie covered her mouth, fighting the urge to giggle. But then, out of nowhere, a tiny giggle escaped her lips, slipping past her hand. There was silence from the officers, and Ettie closed her eyes tightly. "What was that?" one of them asked. "What was what?" the other replied. "I heard a noise." "Didn't hear anything. You're probably just imagining it." Ettie held her breath, hoping the man would keep brushing it off. But the first officer wasn't so easily convinced. "No, I'm telling you I heard something," he insisted. Elsa-May's hand tightened on Ettie's arm, silently pleading with her to hold it together. Ettie squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the absurdity of their situation and focus on staying silent. The last thing they needed was for the police to catch them hiding in the buggy, like a couple of teenagers pulling a prank. The officer leaned closer, his shadow looming over the buggy. Ettie could feel her pulse quickening, her hand sweating as she prayed he wouldn't peer inside. To make matters worse, Elsa-May was so nervous that she dug into Eddie's arm with each passing second. "Maybe it was a chicken. You know how noisy they can get." The first officer paused, seemingly considering the idea. "HMPH. Could be, I guess." Relief started to flood through Ettie, her body slowly relaxing, but only for a second. A sudden tickle bloomed in her throat, the kind that only gets worse the more you try to ignore it. She pressed her lips tightly together, fighting the urge to cough. Beside her, Elsa-May was keeping very still. The officers lingered for a moment longer, talking amongst themselves. Ettie wasn't listening anymore. Her entire focus was on keeping that cough at bay. Her eyes watered, her face turning red from the effort. She pinched her nose and willed the tickle to go away, but it was no use. Just as the officer stepped back, Ettie let out a tiny, barely audible cough. "What was that?" the first officer snapped. The second officer groaned. "I didn't hear anything, man. Let's just go get some donuts. Kelly wants us to take another look through the house." "No. We've done that already. It'll only be wasting time doing it again. We'll tell him we did it." "I am pretty hungry for donuts." "Same. But I swear I heard something." The first officer took another step forward, his boots crunching louder on the gravel. Ettie's eyes widened in panic. Her hand flew to her mouth again, and she ducked down as low as she could. If they were caught now, they'd have no way of explaining what they were doing. Elsa-May gave her another sharp poke as if to say, "This is all your fault. Come on, you're jumpy. We're gonna be late for donuts. Then after that we'll take these clothes to Kelly." "Sounds like a plan." There was a pause, and then they heard the officer's footsteps slowly receding. The sound of car doors opening and closing followed, and then the rumble of the engine as the car pulled away. It wasn't until they were sure the coast was clear that Ettie and Elsa-May dared to move. "That was close," Elsa-May muttered, sitting up and wiping a hand across her brow. "Too close." Ettie shook her head. "Sorry about that. I can't believe they're disobeying Kelly for donuts." Elsa-May shot her a look. "Donuts or not, we almost got found. Then Detective Kelly would lecture us and treat us like children. I wouldn't like that if it happened again." With a final glance around to make sure they were truly alone, they climbed out of the buggy, dusting themselves off. "I was right about the clothes, but if they weren't for the victim, who were they for?" Ettie asked. "Martin, perhaps." "Could be, but why would she be buying him clothes? He said he comes a couple of times a week to learn about chickens." Elsa-May nodded. "That's right. That hardly warrants buying him clothes, seeing she's doing him a favor and not the other way around." Ettie sighed. "I don't know what to think anymore." "Well, I do. We need to do what the officers didn't do." "Look around the house?" Ettie asked. "Exactly. I'm a little surprised. You never like doing things like this." "These are desperate times, Ettie. We need to find our old friend." Ettie followed as her sister marched to the house. All of a sudden, Elsa-May stopped. "I've got it, Ettie." "Got what?" Chapter 17. The police must have smelled the donuts that had been in the buggy, and that made them think of donuts. Ettie huffed. I thought you'd figured out where Freda is. No. I thought you'd find that interesting. Not at all. Not in the slightest. Well, at least we have a chance to look around ourselves without the police interfering. Ettie shot her a sideways glance. Ja, if they're not going to do it, we will. But will we see anything that we didn't see before? There's one way to find out. Freda's front door creaked ominously as Elsa-May pushed it open. Inside, the house was still and quiet. The sisters exchanged a glance before stepping fully inside. It felt strange to invade Freda's personal space without her there, but something needed to be done. Ettie whispered, It's odd. I was expecting something, but everything looks so normal. Just the same as the last time we were here. Let's look around, Elsa-May suggested. Freda might have left some clue about where she went or why that man was found dead here. They started with the kitchen. Ettie glanced over the countertop where a basket of eggs sat. These weren't here the other day. Elsa-May looked over. No, they weren't. Perhaps Martin put them here. Let's keep looking. The pantry was stocked with canned goods and the stove was clean, with a pot of tea still sitting cold on top. It was as if Freda had just stepped out for a moment and never returned. I don't see anything unusual here, except for those eggs, Elsa-May said, opening a few cabinets and inspecting their contents. Just her usual supplies. Ettie nodded, moving toward Freda's small living room. The modest room was neatly kept, with quilts folded on the back of a wooden rocking chair and an old Bible resting on the table beside it. Ettie picked up the Bible, flipping through the pages, but found nothing hidden inside. Let's check her bedroom. I'm right behind you. The bedroom was just as tidy as the rest of the house. The bed was neatly made, the dresser drawers organized, and nothing seemed out of place. Ettie rifled through a few of Freda's personal things, a hairbrush, a few simple bonnets and some folded dresses, but found nothing that explained anything about the murdered man or her disappearance. I thought for sure there'd be something, Ettie muttered. Elsa-May looked around. It seems not. They both stood in the middle of the room, hands on their hips, surveying the space. But no matter how hard they looked, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Freda's life, from all appearances, was just as simple and orderly as ever. I'm starting to wonder if maybe we're wrong about all of this, Elsa-May admitted. Maybe Freda really did just leave to get supplies, and all of this has been one big misunderstanding. Ettie frowned. But what about that dead man? That doesn't just happen by accident. I know, Elsa-May sighed. It's just there's no sign of any struggle, no sign that anyone else was here. Ettie opened her mouth to reply, but then a thought struck her. The chickens. What about them? Elsa-May asked, puzzled. We haven't fed them yet today, Ettie pointed out. And Freda wouldn't go anywhere without making sure they were taken care of. She must have left by force. I'm starting to worry. Elsa-May hesitated, then nodded. You're right. Let's go see the chickens. The two of them slipped out of the house and made their way to the chicken coop. The soft clucking of the hens greeted them as they approached, and Ettie grabbed a bucket of feed from the shed, then she poured it into the feeding trays. As the chickens flocked to the food, Ettie's eyes scanned the area. Everything seemed normal, just like the house, but nothing was normal. Ettie's fingers tightened around the handle of the feed bucket as she heard the sound of tires on gravel. Her heart leapt in her chest, and she exchanged a wide-eyed glance with Elsa-May. Someone's coming, Elsa-May whispered. Without hesitation, they darted behind the corner of the chicken coop, pressing themselves against the wooden boards. Ettie cautiously peeked around the edge, her pulse quickening as she spotted the familiar figure stepping out of the car. It's Harold Green, Ettie whispered urgently. The man who always comes second to Freda in the chicken shows. I know who he is. What's he doing here? He shouldn't be anywhere near Freda's place. They watched in silence as Harold reached into the trunk of his car and pulled out several metal cages. Ettie's stomach churned with unease. He's got chicken cages. What in the world is he up to? He's stealing the chickens, Elsa-May hissed. We can't let him get away with this. You've got to stop him, Elsa-May. Me? Why don't you stop him? Before either of them could decide what to do, the situation took a surprising turn. From the far side of the barn, a figure came charging out like a whirlwind. Freda, very much alive and furious, appeared out of nowhere, her face flushed with anger. "What do you think you're doing?" Freda bellowed, her voice carrying across the yard like thunder. Chapter 18. Harold, clearly startled, dropped the cage he was holding and spun around to face her, his mouth hanging open in shock. "I heard you disappeared," he stammered. I thought I'd take care of your chickens until you got back." Freda's eyes narrowed. "You expect me to believe that? You've been after my chickens for years, and I'm not falling for your tricks now." Harold's face turned bright red, and he sputtered incoherently, clearly struggling to find a plausible excuse. "I wasn't stealing them. I was just making sure they were fed." "I don't believe a word of it," Freda snapped, jabbing a finger in his direction. "Now get off my property before I call the police." Harold, realizing he was outmatched, scurried back to his car, muttering under his breath. He slammed the trunk shut, leaving the cages behind in his haste to flee. Without another word, he jumped into the driver's seat and sped away, his tires kicking up dust as the car disappeared down the road. Ettie and Elsa-May emerged from their hiding spot and rushed over to Freda, who stood with her arms crossed, still seething. "Freda, you're alive," Ettie said. They were so pleased to see her they both wrapped their arms around her. "Yes, I'm alive. And I suppose I owe you both an explanation. We thought something terrible had happened to you. The police are searching for you. Did you know there was a dead man here?" Elsa-May asked. Freda sighed heavily, rubbing her temples, as if the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. "It's a long story, one I wasn't ready to share. But I suppose I can't keep it a secret anymore." "What's going on, Freda?" Ettie asked. Before she could answer, Elsa-May added, "Why were you gone? Did you know that dead man?" Freda glanced around nervously, as if checking to make sure no one else was lurking nearby. "Come inside. I'll explain everything." Inside Freda's house, Ettie and Elsa-May sat down, their curiosity bubbling over as Freda poured tea with shaky hands. The tension in the air was thick, and Freda looked like she had aged rapidly in the past few days. "I should have told you everything from the start. My brother Isaac showed up desperate for help. He got mixed up with some bad people after he left the community years ago, and now they're after him. He just needed a place to hide for a while. We haven't spoken in years, but I agreed he could stay for a while." "Was it your brother?" Ettie asked. "My brother is alive." She set tea in front of them, and Ettie took a sip. "Where is your brother now?" Ettie asked. Freda took a deep breath before continuing. "That man you found, he came looking for Isaac. He must have followed him here. Isaac didn't mean for any of this to happen, but when the man showed up, things got violent. They fought. There was a scuffle and Isaac knocked him out, but the man was only unconscious. He was not dead when we left." Elsa-May gasped, leaning forward. "So what did you do when you saw the man was unconscious?" Freda swallowed hard. "I panicked. Isaac was terrified, so we tied up the man's hands and feet. I thought it would buy us enough time for Isaac to get away. Then I drove him to the bus station, and gave him enough money to get far away. I thought I could come back, untie the man and call the police." Ettie's eyes widened. "But when you got back?" "You two were here," Freda finished, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I didn't know what to do. I didn't want you getting involved, especially not with that man lying unconscious near the chicken coop." Elsa-May continued, "That's why you wanted us to stay inside." Freda nodded. "I went to get the eggs thinking he'd still be tied up, but he was gone. Then when I found him in the coop covered in hay, I didn't know what to do. I tell you, he was fine when I left him. Someone had moved him to the coop and killed him. It wasn't me who did it, and it wasn't Isaac." Ettie frowned, thinking it over. "You ran and hid somewhere. You were just trying to protect your brother, give him enough time to escape before the police came asking all kinds of questions, is that right?" Freda nodded, her hands trembling. "I know I should have called the police right away, but I didn't know what else to do. Isaac's already in enough trouble. I didn't want him getting caught up in this too." Elsa-May sat back in her chair, clearly conflicted. But now we're all involved. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to drag anyone else into Isaac's mess. Ettie leaned forward, placing a comforting hand on Freda's arm. You must tell the police. You've done nothing wrong. Your brother was trying to protect himself, and so were you. But now they need to know the whole story so they can piece it all together. Freda's shoulders slumped as she nodded in agreement. You're right. I'll tell them everything. I didn't expect it to go this far. But who killed the man? Elsa-May asked, voicing the question hanging in the air. I don't know. When we left he was unconscious but alive. Freda pressed a hand to her chest, her face paling. I don't know who killed him. Are you all right? Ettie asked, alarmed. You're not feeling faint, are you? Freda shook her head, but her breathing was shallow. I'm just overwhelmed. Everything's spinning out of control. Ettie immediately reached for her bag. I've got my blood pressure machine with me. Let me check. Elsa-May groaned, rolling her eyes. Ettie, now is not the time for that. But Ettie was already pulling out the machine, determined to help. I just want to make sure she's okay. All this stress isn't good for her. Freda gave a weak smile. I'll be fine, Ettie. Really? Elsa-May shook her head in exasperation. She's right about one thing, you need to stay calm, Freda. Everything will be fine, but you have to be honest with the police. I will. I just need to gather my thoughts before I talk with them. But there's just one thing. Elsa-May leaned forward. What's that? Will you both come with me to the police station? Freda asked, looking from one sister to the other. The three women climbed into Freda's buggy, and Freda took the reins, her hands trembling as the horse and buggy set off toward the police station. Elsa-May sat beside her, casting a quick glance at Ettie, who sat in the back. I'm sorry to drag you both into this, Freda said again. We're as good as family, Freda. You've always looked out for us. Now it's our turn to help you, Ettie said. Elsa-May nodded in agreement. We'll see this through together. The ride was slow, Freda's horse pulling the buggy with the rhythmic clop of hooves on the gravel. The town loomed in the distance, and with each passing minute, Freda seemed to grow more withdrawn, as if bracing herself for the inevitable. When they finally arrived at the police station, Freda took a deep breath and set the reins down. I guess this is it, she whispered. The three women climbed out of the buggy, Freda's steps hesitant as they walked inside. They were met with a stern officer, who eyed them curiously when they asked to see Detective Kelly. Then he simply motioned for them to take a seat. A few minutes later, Detective Kelly appeared. He stared at Freda and Elsa-May announced, This is Freda Fisher. We found her. Ah, Mrs. Fisher. I'm glad you've decided to show up. He gestured for them to follow him into his office. The detective sat behind his desk, folding his arms as he waited for Freda to speak. So, are you ready to tell me what's going on? You've caused quite a stir. Freda nodded. I'm sorry. I should have come to you sooner, but I needed time. I didn't know how to handle everything. Kelly's eyes narrowed. Time for what? The beginning is always a good place to start. Freda took a deep breath and began her story, detailing how her brother Isaac had returned out of the blue seeking help. She explained how Isaac had gotten mixed up with the wrong people after leaving the community years ago, and now those people were after him. He didn't want to be involved with them anymore. They told him that no one leaves, but Isaac was desperate to get out. That man who showed up at my farm, he was part of the group after Isaac. After she'd told him the whole story, Kelly leaned forward. So you're saying your brother knocked this man unconscious? Freda nodded. Yes. He wasn't dead when we drove away. And you were going to call us afterward? Kelly asked, staring at her. I planned to call the police as soon as Isaac was safely out of town. But when I returned to the farm, Ettie and Elsa-May were there. Kelly nodded, processing the information. So what you're saying is that the man was alive when you left the farm? Freda nodded. Yes. I don't know what happened when I was gone. When I saw he was no longer there, I thought he'd woken up and untied himself. I was shocked when I saw his dead body under the hay. Kelly tapped his pen against his notepad, his eyes narrowing in thought. I'll have to look into your brother. What's his name? Isaac Fisher. Kelly typed the name into his computer, pulling up a file. After a few moments he glanced up. Isaac Fisher, wanted for petty theft. Nothing too serious. But you're telling me this man who was chasing him, he's part of a gang? Yes, Freda replied. Isaac told me they were after him because he wanted to leave. They said no one leaves without consequences. Kelly frowned, leaning back in his chair. Sounds like your brother got mixed up in something he couldn't handle. But that still doesn't explain who killed this man. I don't know, Freda whispered, her eyes filling with tears. I don't know what happened. Elsa-May sat back in her chair. Maybe this man wanted to leave the gang too. Or maybe someone else came and thought the man tied up was Isaac. Freda turned to Elsa-May and Ettie. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to drag you both into this. I thought I could handle it on my own, but everything spiraled out of control. Ettie reached over and squeezed Freda's hand. You did what you thought was right. But you can't carry this burden alone anymore. The police need to know everything. Kelly glanced between the women, his stern expression softening just a bit. You did the right thing by coming in, Mrs. Fisher. I'll send someone to track down Isaac, but for now, we need to focus on finding out what really happened to the victim. And what about the gang? Elsa-May asked. If they're after Isaac, could they be dangerous? Kelly sighed, rubbing his temples. That's a possibility we'll have to investigate. But for now, we'll handle one thing at a time. But if Isaac didn't kill the man, who did? And why? Kelly glanced at her, his face unreadable. That's what we're going to find out. I'm going to find your brother, Mrs. Fisher, and bring him in for questioning. Freda placed a hand over her heart, overwhelmed by the weight of everything. He's innocent. Kelly raised his eyebrows. Mrs. Fisher, you wouldn't be the first person to lie for a family member. Now, if it was self-defense, that's a whole different matter, but he has to come clean. No, Elsa-May said. If Freda said that's what happened, then that's what happened. Ettie leaned over. Are you feeling all right, Freda? I'm fine. It's just a lot to take in. Kelly leaned close and locked eyes with Freda. The truth will set you free. You'll feel a lot better once you tell me the truth. Freda swallowed hard, struggling to maintain her composure. I'm telling you the truth, Detective. Isaac didn't kill him. He just wanted to get away. Kelly sat back, assessing her words for a few moments. We'll bring him in, get his side of the story. But until then, you need to understand the position you're in. Keeping this information from us has already complicated things, and cost the department a lot of money. It's put us days behind. Elsa-May folded her arms across her chest, her voice firm. Freda's not a liar. If she says Isaac didn't kill that man, then that's what happened. You're chasing the wrong people, Detective Kelly. Ettie glanced nervously between her sister and the detective, trying to ease the growing tension. Detective, if this gang is dangerous, Isaac was only protecting himself. Surely that must count for something. Self-defense is one thing. But if Isaac was tied up with these criminals, we need to know everything. Otherwise you're all in more trouble than you realize. Freda sighed. I just wanted to protect my brother. The room fell into a tense silence, Freda's words hanging in the air. Where is Isaac now? Kelly's voice cut through the quiet. Freda shifted in her seat. I already told you I dropped him off at the bus station, and he was supposed to leave town. Kelly rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I'll send officers to check the bus station records and see where he might have gone. But Mrs. Fisher, if you're hiding anything else, if there's anything we need to know, now's the time to come clean. Freda's eyes brimmed with tears, and she shook her head slowly. I've told you everything. Kelly sighed deeply. All right. We'll find Isaac and get to the bottom of this. You better hope he tells us the truth when we find him. Kelly stood and walked toward the door, pausing to look back at them. Freda, still pale and clearly shaken, nodded weakly. I understand. As they left the station, Elsa-May shook her head. I don't like this, Ettie. There's something else going on here, and Kelly's just going to get it wrong. Ettie nodded, deep in thought. We'll have to keep our eyes and ears open, that's for sure. But for now, let's get Freda home. She needs to rest. No. What she needs is cake. Sugar helps with shock, and look at her, she seems like she's in shock, Elsa-May said firmly. Freda nodded. I haven't been eating much anyway, not since I've been hiding in the barn. Cake does sound good. Do you mind, Ettie? Mind? No, I'm all for it. Let's go. Chapter 19. The trio entered the small bakery, the sweet scent of freshly baked goods filling the air. Ettie, Elsa-May, and Freda paused in front of the display case, their eyes sweeping over the wide selection of treats. Ettie's gaze settled on a slice of chocolate cake, its thick frosting practically begging to be tasted. This is mine, she declared, pointing to it. And no, Elsa-May, I'm not sharing. You're not even getting a taste this time. Elsa-May pouted dramatically. Fine, but one day I'll get that recipe. I'll make it and eat it all myself. Ettie chuckled. Freda, who had been quiet, leaned closer to the glass, considering her options. After a moment, she pointed to a raspberry shortcake. I'll try this one. Elsa-May scanned the selection and settled on a slice of lemon pie. That'll do for me. Once they placed their order at the counter, the three women made their way to a cozy table by the window. They sat down, the sound of quiet chatter and clinking cups filling the warm space around them. Moments later, a young waitress appeared, balancing a tray with their desserts and coffee. She set each plate down with care, along with steaming mugs of coffee. Here you go, ladies, she said cheerfully. Ettie's eyes sparkled as her chocolate cake was placed in front of her. Thank you, she said, already picking up her fork. Elsa-May grinned as she took her first bite of lemon pie. I was right to choose this. Ettie savored the rich, velvety texture of her cake, and her mood momentarily brightened. But before she could take a second bite, Elsa-May's fork hovered dangerously close to her plate. Hey! Ettie snapped playfully, covering the cake with her hand. I wasn't kidding about not sharing. Elsa-May chuckled. Just testing your dedication to that cake. Freda took a cautious bite of her raspberry shortcake. Her smile was faint but genuine. It was a small victory, in the midst of the heaviness that had settled over them. As they sipped their coffee, Ettie finally spoke. So Freda, what exactly did Isaac say about the people after him? Freda's face clouded again, and she lowered her fork, the sweet moment fading quickly. He said they were dangerous but not much else. Just that he didn't want to live that life anymore. Did he tell you anything specific? Who they were or why they were after him? Freda shook her head. No, Ettie. I only know what I've already told you. But I'm worried that Detective Kelly, he didn't seem to believe me. Kelly will find your brother. And once Isaac explains everything, he'll understand. Elsa-May added, the important thing now is keeping you safe. Freda sighed. I'm not scared. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. The only thing I'm worried about is if that awful man comes back to steal my chickens. They're all I've got left. Ettie smiled gently. Freda, I don't think he's coming back for your chickens. Well, you can't be too sure, Elsa-May chimed in. They finished their cakes, enjoying the sweetness after the stress of the day, though Freda still seemed lost in thought. I think I need to get home. I need to check on the co-op. After talking about it, I am afraid someone might come looking for Isaac, and I'm not talking about the police. Ettie and Elsa-May both nodded in agreement. We'll go with you, Ettie said, standing up. No one's going to steal your chickens while we're around. How often does Martin come to help out? Elsa-May asked. Freda frowned. Martin? Yes. The young man who helps you with the chickens. I think he said his name was Martin, didn't he, Ettie? Ettie nodded but saw the look of confusion plastered all over Freda's face. Yes, he's Martin. Why are you looking like that, Freda? No one helps me with the chickens, and I don't know anyone called Martin. Chapter 20. Ettie and Elsa-May exchanged a worried glance. You're sure you don't know Martin? Ettie pressed, her voice low, almost a whisper. Freda shook her head, her eyes wide with uncertainty. I'm positive. I've never met anyone by that name, let alone had him around my chickens. Elsa-May leaned forward, her voice urgent but soft. Then who is this Martin who claims he's been feeding your chickens? The air seemed to thicken around them. The cozy ambiance of the coffee shop suddenly felt suffocating. The hum of conversation from other tables blurred into a distant buzz, as the three women sat in a bubble of their own confusion and fear. Ettie narrowed her eyes, trying to piece together the strange puzzle. Do you think he could have been watching you? Maybe he's pretending to be someone familiar to get closer. Freda rubbed her temples, her voice shaky. But why would he do that? And how could he know about the chickens unless he's been on my property? Elsa-May drummed her fingers on the table. Maybe he's not really a teenager. What if he's older and trying to disguise himself? It wouldn't be the first time someone's tried to blend in by pretending to be younger. Ettie nodded slowly. And if that's true, then Martin might not be who he says he is. He could be the person who's causing all this trouble, or worse. Freda's eyes filled with tears. Could he be the killer? Ettie reached across the table, giving Freda's hand a reassuring squeeze. We don't know yet, but we'll find out. We need to tell Detective Kelly everything we've learned. He needs to know about this Martin, whoever he really is. Freda took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. No. I don't want to go back to the detective. He doesn't believe me. Elsa-May's eyes hardened with determination. Then we'll make him listen. We'll keep pressing until he understands that this isn't just a misunderstanding. Isaac's life could be at stake. Ettie nodded firmly. And if Martin is involved, he won't get away with it. We'll make sure of that. The three women finished their coffee, the unease lingering like an unwelcome guest. As they prepared to leave, Ettie whispered, Freda, keep your doors locked tonight and don't let anyone in unless you know them. When they arrived back at Freda's house, the rain had started to drizzle down, adding a quiet patter to the already muted atmosphere. As they stepped out of the buggy, they spotted Maggie by the horse paddock, diligently feeding Freda's horse. She came rushing over when she saw Freda and gave her a tight hug. You're alive. Freda smiled. I am. Ettie and Elsa-May explained how they had visited Detective Kelly, how Freda had confessed about her brother Isaac, and the whole mess with the man who had been after him. And finished off with the fact that Freda did not know anyone by the name of Martin. Maggie listened carefully, her expression growing more serious with each passing detail. Do you mean Freda's brother was involved, but he didn't kill that man? Exactly, Elsa-May confirmed. But we still don't know who did, and Freda's scared to death that someone will come back for her. Maggie nodded. She's been through a lot. I'll stay with you tonight, Freda, and keep you company. I don't want you to be alone, especially after all this. It sends a shiver down my spine with that young man lying to us. I wonder who he was. Thank you, Maggie. I'll take you up on that. I don't think I could have stayed here alone tonight. With the matter settled, Freda with Maggie in tow drove Ettie and Elsa-May back to their home. As they pulled up to the house, the rain started coming down harder, and the sisters hurried inside to escape the downpour. The warmth of their cozy home greeted them as they stepped through the door. Snowy was lying in front of the fire, opened his eyes and then closed them again. Kelly the cat was spread out on the couch asleep, and didn't move a muscle. Ettie shrugged off her damp shawl and glanced toward the kitchen. My turn to cook tonight, she said with a sigh. Let's see what we've got left. Elsa-May settled into a chair at the kitchen table, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Do something hearty. It's been a long day. Ettie rummaged through the pantry, but it seemed their supplies had dwindled significantly. She found plenty of potatoes, endless potatoes it seemed, but not much else. After a bit more searching, she managed to scrounge up some leftover cheese and a bit of onion. Her mind wandered to a simple old-fashioned dish. Looks like it'll have to be potato and onion pie, Ettie announced, grabbing the necessary ingredients and setting to work. Elsa-May wrinkled her nose. Well, it's better than nothing. I suppose we'll have to make a trip into town tomorrow for supplies. While Ettie cooked, Elsa-May knitted and the rain continued to beat against the windows. Later, when they were eating their supper, the conversation turned to the man who had been found in Freda's chicken coop. Who do you think did it? It's strange, don't you think? We know Freda's brother knocked the man out, but he didn't kill him. Elsa-May's fork hovered in the air. It could be anyone. But we can't ignore the fact that someone wanted that man dead. And if we don't find out who did it, Freda will never be safe in her own home. Exactly, and we need to find out about Martin. That's why I think we should pay Detective Kelly another visit tomorrow. He might have more information by now, and if he does, maybe he'll share it with us. Elsa-May sighed, setting her fork down. Martin might be part of the gang, and he was trying to get information from us about Freda. Ettie nodded, her mind already spinning with the possibilities. He didn't look like a criminal. Perhaps that's what makes him a good one. The rain continued to fall outside, and its sound seemed to mirror the heaviness of the situation. Ettie sighed. I just hope we're not poking our noses into something too dangerous. We've come this far, Ettie replied. We can't back out now. With their plan set, the sisters cleared the table and washed the dishes in companionable silence. Once the kitchen was tidied, they retired to the living room. Chapter 21. Ettie and Elsa-May were halfway through their breakfast when the front door of their house burst open with a loud bang. Freda and Maggie rushed in, their faces pale and filled with anxiety. Ettie, startled, dropped her fork, and Elsa-May nearly spilled her coffee. Freda. Maggie. What? Ettie began, but Freda cut her off. They've arrested Isaac for killing that man. Freda blurted out, her hands shaking as she clutched the back of a chair for support. Elsa-May set her coffee down carefully, her brows furrowed in concern. Arrested him for what? Maggie chimed in. Detective Kelly found him in the next county. They brought him back last night, and they've charged him with the murder of that man in Freda's chicken coop. Ettie and Elsa-May stared at each other, stunned. But he was unconscious when you left with Isaac, Freda, not dead. And he'd been moved, Ettie added. I know, but Kelly doesn't believe me. He thinks Isaac's lying, and now they've locked him up, saying he's the killer. Ettie shook her head, trying to process the information. That doesn't make any sense. Isaac was just trying to get away from that gang. Why would he kill anyone? That's exactly what I told them, Freda said, her voice breaking. But they won't listen. They think I'm covering for him. Kelly's convinced Isaac is the one responsible, and I'm lying to help him. Maggie stepped forward. We need to do something about this. We can't let Isaac go to jail for something he didn't do. Ettie looked over at Elsa-May, who seemed just as shocked as she was. What do you expect us to do? Ettie asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. We have no sway with Detective Kelly. He's made up his mind. Exactly, Elsa-May added. We've told Kelly everything we know. He's the one with the authority. What more can we do? Freda's eyes filled with tears as she clutched her hands together. But you've always been able to get to the bottom of things before. I'm begging you. You have to help Isaac. He didn't do this. It's not enough to just sit here and wait. We need to find the real killer, Maggie said. We can't just leave Isaac to rot in jail. Besides, that means they're not looking for the real killer, and that means that Freda is still not safe. Elsa-May glanced at Ettie, her face filled with concern. She has a point, Ettie. Isaac is in serious trouble, and we owe it to Freda to help. Ettie nodded slowly. All right. We'll see what we can do. But we'll have to be careful. We don't want to step on Kelly's toes, or he'll shut us out completely. Freda's face lit up with a glimmer of hope. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Thank you so much. Elsa-May sighed. But where do we even start? We don't have much to go on. Maggie didn't miss a beat. We start by asking questions. Someone in the community must have seen something. We know that the dead man had something to do with Isaac's past, but there's got to be more to it than that. We just need to figure out who had the most to gain from getting rid of him. Ettie tapped her fingers on the table thoughtfully. If we're going to help, we need to approach this carefully. We don't want to cause any more suspicion than there already is. Elsa-May nodded. Agreed. We need to talk to people, but subtly. Let's not make it obvious we're investigating. Maggie grinned. Subtle is my middle name. Ettie raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Fine. Let's start by talking to people who knew Isaac. Someone might know something useful. Ettie, we can't do anything without the name of the victim, Elsa-May said. When I was driving Isaac into town, Isaac told me a lot. I didn't want to say too much before. Everyone stared at Freda, waiting for her to continue. Chapter 22. Freda took a deep breath, her eyes darting nervously around the room before she finally spoke. His name was David Graeber. He was part of the same organization as Isaac, but he wasn't a stranger to Isaac. He had family connections here. That's why Isaac recognized him right away. His father used to live in our community. Ettie's heart skipped a beat. Graeber? As in the Graeber family from the other side of the county? Freda nodded. Exactly. Isaac said that David's father, Aaron Graeber, left the Amish years ago under mysterious circumstances. No one ever talked about why, but David grew up outside the faith. Apparently, he still had ties to the area though. He'd been coming back on and off for years. But it wasn't just to visit. What was he doing here? Maggie asked. That's the thing. Isaac wasn't sure, but he knew David had some unfinished business in the community. Isaac mentioned overhearing a conversation where David said something about a debt. He was coming back to collect, but Isaac didn't know from whom or why. Ettie exchanged a glance with Elsa-May. A debt, she repeated, mulling over the word. That could mean a lot of things. Maggie rubbed her chin thoughtfully. It could be financial, but it could also be something more personal. If David had connections here, there might be bad blood with someone in the community. Do you think it's possible someone here owed him money? Or worse, could he have been blackmailing someone? Elsa-May asked. The room fell silent, as everyone considered the possibility. Ettie tapped her fingers again, her mind spinning with questions. If David had been blackmailing someone, it could explain why he was killed. We need to look into David's family history. If his father left the community under mysterious circumstances, maybe it wasn't just about leaving the Amish way. There could be more to the story, Maggie said. Ettie nodded. Kelly must know this about the victim. I wonder why he kept it from us. He didn't even offer his name. To be fair, Ettie, we never asked his name, Elsa-May pointed out. We'll have to dig into the Graeber family's past. Someone must know something, even if it's just a rumor. Freda shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I think I know where we can start. There's an old woman who lives on the edge of town, Miriam Hoffman. She used to be friends with David Graeber's mother, back before he left the community. She might know something about why Aaron left, or even if David was coming back to see someone specific. Ettie frowned. Miriam Hoffman? I know her. She's not the easiest person to talk to, but if anyone knows about old community secrets, it's her. Elsa-May sighed. We'll have to approach her carefully. She doesn't take kindly to gossip or outsiders asking too many questions. Maggie stood up. Well, we're not outsiders, are we? We'll go to her, tell her we're just concerned about our community and see what she knows. But we'll have to be careful about how much we share. Ettie stood as well, her mind set. Let's not waste any time. If David had any unfinished business here, someone in the community knows about it. We just need to find out who. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave, Freda hesitated. I feel like I've made such a mess of everything. If I'd just called the police sooner, maybe none of this would have happened. Ettie placed a comforting hand on Freda's arm. You did what you thought was best at the time. We'll get to the bottom of this and clear Isaac's name. You're not in this alone. When they made their way to Miriam's, Ettie's mind was racing, trying to piece together the puzzle of David Graeber's life and death. When they finally arrived at Miriam's small, weathered cottage, Ettie hesitated for a moment before knocking. The door creaked open a few inches, and a pair of sharp, inquisitive eyes peeked out. What do you want? Came a voice as sharp as the wind. Chapter 23. Ettie offered a small smile. Miriam. It's Ettie, Elsa-May and Freda Fisher. We're hoping to speak with you for a moment. It's about the Graeber family. The door opened a little wider, and Miriam's brow furrowed. Graeber? What do you want to know about them? Maggie stepped forward. "Hi, I'm here too. We were wondering if you could tell us anything about Aaron Graber. We understand he left the community years ago, and we're trying to learn more about why." Miriam studied them for a long moment before opening the door wider and stepping aside. "Come in, but if you're looking for gossip, you're at the wrong house." They stepped inside the dimly lit room. Ettie glanced around, noticing how gloomy everything was. Miriam settled into an old rocking chair and looked them over. "Aaron Graber was a troubled man," she said after a moment. "He never quite fit in, even when he was young. Always had one foot out the door, as if he was just waiting for an excuse to leave." "What kind of trouble was he in?" Maggie asked. Miriam's eyes narrowed. "That's not for me to say. But I'll tell you this, when he left behind more than just his family. He left behind debts too. And not just money. He owed people, important people, favors, and some of them never forgot." Ettie's heart sank. If David was back here, it wasn't just for a visit. Who would still hold a grudge after all these years? Miriam shook her head slowly. "Old grudges die hard around here." "It's David Graber." "He's dead," Elsa-May blurted out. Miriam didn't look too shocked. "If you're looking for someone who might have wanted him dead, you'll need to look at who had unfinished business with Aaron. The sins of the father and all that." The weight of her words settled heavily over the group. Ettie glanced at Elsa-May, who gave her a subtle nod. They had their work cut out for them. Ettie hoped they were on the right track. Chapter 24. Ettie sat back, letting Miriam's words sink in. The sins of the father? What had Aaron Graber done all those years ago that still mattered now? And more importantly, who in the community still held onto those old grudges? Elsa-May leaned in slightly. "Miriam, do you know anyone in the community who was close to Aaron before he left? Or maybe someone who would still care about the debts he left behind?" Miriam paused, her eyes flickering with something Ettie couldn't quite place. Was it hesitation or fear? After a moment she spoke again, her voice softer now. "There were two men. You'd never think of them as connected to the Graber family, but sometimes it's the quiet ones who know the most." Ettie raised an eyebrow. "Who?" Miriam's voice dropped to a near whisper, as if saying their names out loud might summon trouble. "The man who owns that junk store next door to you, Freda." "Oh, you know Neville?" Freda asked. "I know about him, that's all." "Do you know Harold Green?" Miriam asked. "I do, because he had dealings with Aaron before he left." Ettie blinked. "Neville and Mr. Green? I don't see how they fit into this." Miriam's eyes darkened. "Oh, they fit. Neville's family goes back as far as the Graber family, and they've always been tied up in odd business dealings. Do you think his little junk shop is just for odds and ends? That place is a front. I don't know what for, but I think it had to do with the reason Aaron left." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "And what about Mr. Green? What would he have to do with Aaron?" Miriam glanced around the room, as if to make sure no one was listening. Years ago, when Aaron was still in the community, he and Mr. Green had a falling out. They were business partners of sorts, trading livestock. After Aaron left, Mr. Green always acted like he had been wronged, like Aaron had cost him something important. And it wasn't just the chickens. Ettie's pulse quickened. "And you think Mr. Green might have had something to do with David's death?" "I'm not saying he killed the man," Miriam said slowly, "but I wouldn't be surprised if Green had a hand in keeping certain old debts from being repaid, by whatever means necessary." Maggie crossed her arms. "Are you saying that both Neville and Mr. Green had something to gain from Aaron's disappearance, and now David's death?" Miriam nodded solemnly. "I'd look long and hard at those two. They know more than they're letting on, and if David came back to collect on old business, I reckon one of them wouldn't want to pay up." The room fell silent as Miriam's words sank in. Ettie exchanged a glance with Elsa-May, whose brow was furrowed in thought. Maggie stood up and gave a curt nod. "Well, I guess we know where to start looking." Ettie stood as well, thanking Miriam. "You've been more helpful than you know. Oh, and do you know of a young man called Martin?" Miriam scrunched her eyebrows together. "Not off the top of my head." They left and made their way back to the horse and buggy. As they drove along the winding country roads, Ettie couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into dangerous territory. Neville and Harold Green, two men who seemed harmless enough but had histories that might now be coming back to haunt them. Elsa-May broke the silence. I never would have guessed those two had ties to Aaron Graber. Maggie smirked. You know what they say about the quiet ones. And Harold Green, Ettie added, frowning. He's always had it out for Freda, but this goes beyond some petty rivalry over chickens. It does, Freda agreed. Maggie rubbed her chin. You think it's possible David was trying to get money or information from them, and they decided to get rid of him? Ettie sighed. I don't know. But we need to tread carefully. We don't want to spook them before we have something solid. The group made their way down the road, their minds churning with the new information. They had 3 suspects now but no proof. Neville with his junk store and mysterious business dealings, and Mr. Green with his long-standing grudge against Aaron, and now David. And also Martin, whoever he was. Chapter 25. Ettie glanced at Maggie, who gave her a firm nod. We'll start talking with Neville. He might be the easiest to crack. If his junk store is a front for something else, he's probably nervous already. And Harold Green? Freda asked. We'll get to him next, Ettie said, her eyes narrowing. But one thing's for sure, someone in this town wanted David Graber dead. And we're going to find out who. The bell above the door jingled as Ettie, Maggie and Elsa-May stepped into Neville's cluttered junk store. Freda had chosen to stay in the buggy, out of sight. The place smelled of old wood and metal, with mismatched shelves crammed with everything from rusty tools to broken furniture. Ben was behind the counter, his eyes narrowing as soon as he saw them. Ladies, what brings you by again today? Maggie stepped forward, her hands resting casually at her sides. We just had a few questions for you about Aaron Graber. Neville's face twitched, but he kept his composure. Aaron Graber? That's a name I haven't heard in years. Why are you asking about him? Ettie watched him closely. Because his son David was the one murdered at Freda's place. And we think his death might have something to do with old business between Aaron and some people here in town. Neville's hand faltered as he reached for something on the counter. His eyes flicked from Ettie to Maggie, then back again. I don't know what you're talking about. I had nothing to do with Aaron or his son. Are you sure about that? Maggie asked. Because we've heard otherwise. You and Aaron had some business dealings before he left. Maybe David came back to settle a score, and you didn't like that. Neville's face went pale, and Ettie could see the fear creeping into his eyes. He shook his head. You've got it all wrong. I didn't have anything to do with David's death. Ettie took a step closer. Then why do you look so nervous? Neville's gaze darted toward the door, then back at the women standing before him. Look, Aaron and I had some dealings back in the day, but that's long over. I don't know why David came back, but I had nothing to do with it. I didn't even know he was the one who was murdered, okay? Neville's sister Narita walked through a door and her face lit up when she saw them. Hello again. Did you find Harold Green? We did, and we had a nice talk with him. That's good. I saw Freda is back. I drove past there this morning and saw her out and about. That's right. Maggie gave a nod. Well, can we help you with anything today? Narita asked. Ettie sensed something was off. She wasn't as friendly this time. The man who was shot next door was David Graber. Does that ring any bells for you? Aaron Graber's son, Elsa-May added. Narita shook her head, glancing at her brother. Not to me. I don't know them. Maggie's eyes narrowed. If that's the case, you won't mind if we ask around a bit more, will you? Maybe some of the folks who come through your shop know more than they've let on. Neville stepped forward, all 6'4" of him. No. You can all stay off my property from now on. You're all banned from this place just like your friend from next door. Get out, he shouted. Ettie was shocked at the unexpected outburst, and took several steps toward the door. The 3 of them turned and left. We've upset him, Elsa-May said as they walked back to the waiting horse and buggy. What happened? Freda asked when they were all in the buggy. We got nowhere, Maggie said. Next stop, Mr. Green. I'll wait in the buggy when we get there, Freda said. Maggie picked up the reins and the horse moved forward. Well, I hope Harold is a little more friendly. Elsa-May sighed. We can't go there directly. Why not? Ettie asked. Chapter 26. We need to refuel before we deal with Mr. Green. Maggie raised an eyebrow. Refuel? Elsa-May gave her sister a look. Maggie, we can't go marching into another man's shop on an empty stomach. We'll get cranky, and Mr. Green will smell it on us. Besides, I'm starving. Ettie couldn't help but smile at her sister's insistence. The four of them headed to an eatery that Maggie recommended. Is that the one with the good pies? Freda asked. That's the one. Elsa-May grinned. I'm thinking a slice of cherry pie and a cup of hot coffee will get us back on track. Freda rolled her eyes but relented, following the group as they walked toward the diner. Fine. But let's not take too long. When they entered the cozy little diner, the warmth and smell of freshly brewed coffee instantly lifted their spirits. The diner was a small no-frills place, with checkered floors and vinyl booths that had seen better days, but the atmosphere was comforting. The bell above the door tinkled as they stepped inside, and a cheerful waitress waved them toward an empty booth near the window. Sit tight, ladies. I'll be right with you, the waitress called from behind the counter. They slid into the booth, with Elsa-May immediately picking up the laminated menu. I think I'll have a hot turkey sandwich and mashed potatoes. Oh, and that cherry pie I mentioned. Maggie smiled, finally relaxing a little. I'll have the same but with apple pie. Ettie glanced at Freda, who was staring out the window with a frown. You all right? Freda turned back to the table and shrugged. Just thinking about Mr. Green. He's been after my land for years. I remember he once tried to convince me to sell him the back half of the property, because he claimed it was bad for crops. As if I didn't know better. He just wanted the space for his chicken coops. Maggie shook her head. It sounds like he's never up to any good. And now with this whole business of David Graeber. I wouldn't put anything past someone like that. Their conversation paused as the waitress returned, smiling warmly as she took their orders. As the waitress walked away, Elsa-May sighed happily. I've always said there's nothing better than a hot diner meal on a cold day. This will give us the energy we need to deal with Mr. Green. Ettie took a sip of the water that had been placed in front of them, and glanced around the diner. It was relatively quiet, with only a few other patrons, mostly older couples enjoying a late breakfast. She let the calm atmosphere wash over her for a moment, a welcome break from the tension of their investigation. So, Elsa-May continued, picking up the conversation, what's the plan with Mr. Green? We can't just barge in there accusing him of murder. Maggie nodded in agreement. We need to ease into it. He seems like a paranoid man by nature. If we go in too strong, he'll clam up faster than a mouse caught in a trap. Ettie thought for a moment, stirring her coffee absently. We'll have to play it like we did with Neville. Ask him about Aaron Graeber and see how he reacts. But we'll need to be careful not to mention David's death right away. Elsa-May nodded, her expression serious for once. Good idea. Mr. Green's been around long enough to know how to keep secrets, but if we push the right buttons we might be able to get something out of him. Their food arrived shortly after, and for a few moments they focused on their plates. Ettie couldn't help but enjoy the comforting warmth of her vegetable soup, the rich broth warming her from the inside out. Across from her, Elsa-May was happily tucking into her turkey sandwich, and Freda's mood had noticeably improved as she dug into her own plate of comfort food. Maggie picked at her food with a look of deep concentration, as if even her lunch couldn't distract her from the task at hand. So, Elsa-May said between mouthfuls, if we don't get anything from Harold Green, what's our next move? Ettie shrugged. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I have a feeling Mr. Green knows more than he lets on. We need to figure out how to get him to talk. Maggie's eyes narrowed. We might have to use Freda to get to him. Freda looked up, startled. Me? Maggie nodded. Maybe it's you he's interested in, and not your chickens. If you ask him a few questions, maybe play up how worried you are about your brother, he might open up. Freda hesitated, clearly unsure. I don't know, Maggie. What if he gets suspicious? You'll be fine. We'll be with you the whole time. Elsa-May wiped her mouth with her napkin and leaned back in the booth, looking satisfied with her meal. Well, I think we're ready. This was just what we needed. Now let's get back out there and see what Mr. Green's hiding. As they headed toward Green's property, Elsa-May suggested, Freda, Maggie is right, it's best if you do all the talking. I don't know. I don't think he's as fond of me as you think. He's always trying to find a way to take advantage of a situation. He once tried to convince me to sell him my old co-op for half its worth. I'm not so sure he has anyone's best interests in mind but his own. That's true. But we're not asking you to cozy up to him, Freda. Just let him think you're concerned about the victim. Maybe act a little lost or confused about what's happening, and see if he lets anything slip, Ettie suggested. Freda sighed, clearly nervous. All right, I'll try. But I can't promise anything. Chapter 27. Maggie stopped the buggy a little up the road from Harold Green's farm. Freda bit her lip. I can't do this alone. Would you come with me, Ettie? It was the last thing Ettie wanted to do, but when she saw Freda's pleading eyes she had to agree. All right, but you should do the talking. Okay. As they walked to Mr. Green's house, Ettie noticed how different it looked compared to the other homes in the area. The paint was peeling off the walls, and the fence surrounding the yard was old and sagging in several places. Still, the place had a certain charm in its neglected way, a reminder of simpler times. Freda led the way up the path to the front door. Here we go, she muttered under her breath as she knocked on the door. There was a long pause before they heard footsteps approaching from the other side. The door opened just a crack, and Mr. Green's weathered face appeared, his gray eyes narrowing as he peered out at them. Well, well, he said slowly, his voice low and raspy. What brings you around here today? Don't tell me you're selling eggs door to door now, Freda. Freda gave a nervous chuckle and shook her head. No. We were just in the neighborhood and thought we'd stop by. He opened the door a little wider and laughed. You haven't come here to kill me, have you, Freda? What? Freda was horrified. Sorry, bad joke. Seems to me you wouldn't be coming by just for a social call. Do they know who killed that man yet? Freda simply shook her head. Ettie took a step forward. Freda clearly needed assistance. We're just trying to make sense of it all, and we thought maybe you could help. Mr. Green leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. Help? Me? I don't know anything about that man, other than what everyone's saying around town. Well, Ettie began. The victim was David Graeber, and we believe you know his father, Aaron Graeber. At the mention of Aaron Graeber's name, Mr. Green's face twitched ever so slightly, but he quickly masked his reaction. Aaron Graeber? That name brings back some memories. But like I said, I don't have anything to do with him. Debts, grudges, anything of that nature? Ettie asked. If you want to know about Aaron Graeber's debts or grudges, you're asking the wrong man. Freda spoke up. I'm worried about Isaac. He's in jail, and they think he had something to do with David's death. We know he's not guilty, but we need to understand why someone might have wanted David dead. When the killer is found, they'll let Isaac go. Mr. Green shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flickering with something Ettie couldn't quite place. David, huh? Well, I can't say I'm surprised the boy got himself into trouble. His father always had a way of bringing misfortune to those around him. Elsa-May frowned. What do you mean by that? Mr. Green hesitated, glancing around as if checking for eavesdroppers before speaking again. Aaron Graeber got mixed up in some bad business years ago. Left town owing a lot of people money, me included. But that's old news. David Graeber showing up here has nothing to do with me. Freda wasn't convinced. So you have no idea why David came back to town? He didn't come looking for you to collect any inherited debts? Mr. Green's eyes narrowed. He came by my place, sure. Wanted to talk about his father. But that's it. He didn't threaten me, if that's what you're thinking. When was he here? Ettie asked. The other day. Mr. Green let out a slow breath, as if considering how much to reveal. He was looking for information. Wanted to know who else his father might have been in debt to. I told him I didn't know much, but that wasn't the answer he was looking for. Eddie's pulse quickened. Did he mention anyone else? Someone who might have had a reason to kill him? Mr. Green shook his head. No, he didn't say. But if you ask me, there's more to this than an old debt. Aaron Graber made enemies in more ways than one, and his son probably inherited those enemies if you want my opinion. If you know anything that could help Isaac, you need to tell us. He's sitting in jail for something he didn't do. Mr. Green sighed, rubbing his hand over his weathered face. Look, all I can tell you is that David was poking around, asking questions he shouldn't have been. If someone wanted him dead, it wasn't just about money. There are some old wounds in this town that haven't healed. Like what? Ettie asked. Finally, Mr. Green let out a frustrated grunt. All right, fine. There's one more person you might want to talk to. Narita Brown. She was close to Aaron back in the day. If anyone knows why David was back in town, it's her. Eddie's eyes widened. Narita Brown? Is she by any chance Neville's sister? One and the same. You didn't hear it from me, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had something to do with all this. Thank you, Mr. Green, Ettie said, her voice firm. You've been a great help. Mr. Green grumbled under his breath. Don't spread that around. Bye for now, Freda said as they were leaving. And stay away from my chickens. I was just trying to feed them, he said as they were walking away. Well, Ettie said after a moment, I didn't see that coming. Narita is connected to Aaron and David. This could be the key to clearing Isaac's name. When they got back to the buggy, they told the others what had been said. Before they got through the whole story, a young man drove by on a bicycle. He saw them and his face fell, but his legs pedaled harder. Was that? Maggie asked. Yes, Ettie said. That was Martin. Quick after him. Chapter 28. The horse and buggy was facing the opposite direction, so Maggie quickly turned the buggy around. We'll catch him. A horse can go faster than a bike. Even downhill? Elsa-May asked. I believe so. They gained on the bike, but he still didn't stop and showed no signs of slowing down. Maggie moved the buggy in front of him and then cut him off. He had no choice but to come to a hasty stop over the top of the handlebars. The four ladies jumped out of the buggy to see if he was all right. By the time they got to him, he was sitting in the dirt rubbing his wrist. Who are you? Elsa-May demanded. Martin. From where? We should take him to the police with all the lies he told us when Freda was missing, Maggie spat out. No. Please don't. Well, start talking, young man, Elsa-May demanded. Who are you and what do you have to do with a murder? I've got nothing to do with any murder. My father's Harold Green. He asked me to find out if Freda was still missing. He wanted the chickens and that's all. That's all. Freda repeated in shock. So much for him saying he wanted to feed them. I'm sorry. He threatened to kick me out of the house again if I didn't do it. Are you all right? Ettie asked. I think so. The young man got to his feet. We're sorry you fell off your bike, Elsa-May said. It's okay. No harm done. He got on his bike and pedaled back in the direction of his home. I feel dreadful about this. I think we should finish up for the day, clear our heads, and start again tomorrow, Ettie suggested, and all the ladies agreed. Chapter 29. Several minutes later, after saying their goodbyes, Ettie and Elsa-May stepped inside their cozy home, but as soon as they entered, Ettie noticed something wasn't quite right. Snowy, no. Ettie exclaimed as her eyes landed on the mess in front of the couch. The blood pressure machine had been chewed up. Snowy sat beside the mangled device, his big brown eyes looking up innocently at Ettie. Well, you should have taken it with you today, Elsa-May said. Ettie shook a finger at the dog. Snowy, you know better. You're not a pup anymore. You can't just chew everything in sight. Snowy lowered his head slightly, his tail wagging slowly as if he wasn't sure whether he was in real trouble or if he'd get away with it. Ettie shook her head and turned to Elsa-May, who was chuckling from across the room. Oh, come on, Ettie, Elsa-May said, walking over to the dog and giving him a pat on the head. He's a good boy. Aren't you, Snowy? She cooed, rubbing his ears. Snowy wagged his tail harder now, clearly pleased with Elsa-May's attention. Ettie narrowed her eyes at her sister. He's chewed up the blood pressure machine, Elsa-May. Do you know how important that is? And it wasn't cheap. Elsa-May chuckled again. Oh, Ettie, it's just a little machine. He didn't mean any harm. Besides, your blood pressure is fine. One missed reading won't hurt. I'll have to see if I can fix it. Ettie let out a huff of frustration and bent down to inspect the damage. The tubing was completely mangled, but the machine itself seemed to be in working order. She pulled a pair of scissors from a drawer and snipped the chewed end of the tubing off, trying to salvage what was left. Elsa-May leaned against the counter, still smiling as if the whole situation were some grand joke. You're too soft on Snowy, Ettie grumbled as she worked. How will he learn right from wrong? And you're too hard on him. He's just a dog. You can't expect him to know the difference between a chew toy and a blood pressure machine. Ettie shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. He should know by now. He's old enough. After a few more moments of fiddling with the tubing, Ettie managed to reattach it to the machine. She tested it by taking her own blood pressure, pressing the button and waiting for the familiar tightening around her arm. Once the reading came through, she scribbled the numbers down on the notepad she kept nearby. See? It still works, Elsa-May said, watching her. Ettie turned to her, exasperated. Barely. And from now on, I'm taking this thing with me whenever I go out. I can't trust him not to chew it up again. Elsa-May waved a hand dismissively. Oh, nonsense. Just put it up high where he can't reach it. No need to carry it around like your life depends on it. What if my life does depend on it? Just let me do things my way. It's easier for me if I know it's safe. Elsa-May sighed. I always let you do things your way, Ettie. But you don't have to make life harder than it needs to be. Ettie glanced over at the blood pressure machine, now safe but looking a little worse for wear. I'm not making things harder. I'm just being careful. Fine. Do things your way as always. But if you ask me, you're overthinking it. Ettie needed a break from the conversation. She pulled on her gardening gloves and headed toward the back door. I'm going out to pick some salad vegetables, she called over her shoulder. Elsa-May gave a little wave. Don't let Snowy eat those too. Chapter 30. Ettie stepped outside into the crisp evening air, the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves filling her lungs. She found peace in her garden, especially when things got stressful. It gave her time to clear her mind and gather her thoughts. As she moved through the rows of vegetables, she picked a few bright green lettuce leaves, some tomatoes and a couple of cucumbers, her hands moving rhythmically through the plants. She could hear Snowy trotting around the yard, sniffing at the edges of the garden but keeping his distance, probably knowing he was still in trouble. Ettie smiled slightly but kept her focus on her task. The garden was a place where things made sense. There were no mysteries here, just simple, honest work. After gathering enough for a light salad, she headed back inside, feeling a little more relaxed. Elsa-May was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping on a cup of hot tea. Ettie set the vegetables down on the counter and washed them, glancing over at Elsa-May. By the way, my blood pressure was fine. Thanks for asking. Elsa-May chuckled. Were you stewing over it the whole time you were out there? I could tell something was wrong by the way you were stomping around the garden. Ettie sighed, shaking her head as she began slicing the tomatoes. I wasn't stomping. Oh, you were. But it's fine. You always stew when you get upset about something. But Ettie, really, there's no need to stress so much. Snowy's not going to chew up your machine again if you just put it out of reach. You're acting like it's the end of the world. Ettie stopped slicing for a moment, looking at her sister. It's not just about the machine. It's about... I don't know. Lately, everything feels like it's spiraling out of control. Isaac's in jail, there's a murderer on the loose, and now I have to worry about fixing things at home too. It's just a lot. Elsa-May looked at her sister with a sympathetic smile. I know it's a lot. But you're not dealing with it alone. We're all in this together. And besides, we'll get Isaac out of jail. I know it. Ettie took a deep breath, nodding slowly. I hope so. Hope's not even the right word, Elsa-May said with confidence. We will. Ettie shrugged, hoping her sister was right as she went about preparing the salad. As they sat down to eat their supper, the quiet house seemed to hum with a sense of peace, at least for now. Chapter 31. It was mid-morning when Freda and Maggie showed up at Ettie and Elsa-May's house. Freda sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, her expression distant. The other ladies were seated around her, the remnants of their lunch spread out in front of them. They'd been going over the details of their investigation, trying to piece together the mystery of David Graeber's death and Isaac's involvement, but now the conversation had taken a quieter, more personal turn. I can't do the show this year, Freda said softly, staring into her tea. The room fell silent for a moment as her words hung in the air. Ettie exchanged a glance with Elsa-May, who raised an eyebrow, silently urging Ettie to say something. Finally, Ettie cleared her throat. Freda, she began gently, you've been looking forward to that show for months. You've got those prize hens. Freda shook her head. It doesn't feel right, Ettie. Not with Isaac in jail, under suspicion of murder. How can I stand in front of everyone and pretend like everything's normal when it's not? Elsa-May leaned forward. Freda, you can't put your life on hold because of what's happening with your brother. This show means a lot to you. It does, but I don't want people talking about me. About Isaac. You know how people gossip in this town. They'll look at me and think I'm some sort of heartless woman who's just going about her life while my brother sits in a jail cell. They'll talk whether you show your chickens or not, Freda. People always find something to say. But hiding away isn't going to help. You need to stand up and remind them who you are, and showing those chickens might be just the thing to do it, Maggie suggested. Freda sighed, rubbing her hands over her face. I just don't know if I have the energy. Ettie reached across the table and gently placed her hand on Freda's. You don't have to do it for the people in this town. Do it for yourself. You've always loved that show. And it might give you something to focus on, something to take your mind off all the heaviness. Freda bit her lip, her eyes filling with doubt. I haven't had time to sort out all your knitted items either, Elsa-May. That can wait, Elsa-May said. What if? What if it goes wrong? What if people start asking me about Isaac? Let them ask. You don't owe them any explanations, Maggie told her. Ettie smiled, sensing that Freda was starting to come around. There you go, and we'll all go with you. You won't be alone. Maggie smiled. And who knows? Maybe you'll be the winner again this year. Freda looked at each of them in turn. Slowly, a small smile crept across her face. All right. I'll do it. But only because you're all making me. Elsa-May clapped her hands together, beaming. Excellent. You won't regret it. And besides, you've got to show those hens off. They're too good to keep hidden. Ettie chuckled. It'll be good for you, Freda. You'll feel better once you're back in your element, showing off all the hard work you've done. I hope so. I just hope the show doesn't turn into another disaster, with everything that's been happening lately. Freda gave a small sigh. Maggie gave her a reassuring smile. Don't worry. We'll be there to keep things under control. And if anyone has the nerve to bring up Isaac, we'll handle it. Freda nodded, her shoulders relaxing a little. Okay. I'll start getting things ready tomorrow. Ettie watched her friend's face brighten for the first time in days, and felt a surge of hope. Elsa-May stood up. Well then, it's settled. You're going to the show, and we'll be right there with you. Now who wants dessert? Maggie groaned. We just finished lunch, Elsa-May. How can you be thinking about dessert already? Elsa-May grinned mischievously. I'm always thinking about dessert. The group laughed, the tension in the room melting away if only for the moment. Chapter 32. The day of the chicken show arrived. Freda, who usually approached show days with confidence, felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. She had been up since before dawn, tending to her hens and making sure they were in the best possible condition. By the time Freda reached the fairgrounds, the scene was already bustling with activity. Farmers and hobbyists were unloading their birds, setting up cages, and arranging displays. Tents popped up across the field, and tables were lined with a variety of breeds, each competitor hoping to impress the judges. Freda parked her horse and buggy near the back and stepped out, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The familiar sights and sounds of the annual event filled the air: clucking chickens, people chatting, and the clatter of cages being set up. Despite the lively atmosphere, a heavy sense of unease lingered. The small-town gossip about Isaac's situation still weighed on her, and she knew people would be curious. She got to work setting up her cages and arranging her hens with practiced precision. As she checked each hen, she found comfort in the familiar routine. It was a welcome distraction from her racing thoughts. Freda's friends soon arrived, moving through the crowd toward her. Ettie, Elsa-May, and Maggie came bearing smiles and encouragement. Ettie was carrying a basket of baked goods, clearly prepared for an impromptu picnic after the judging. "You made it," Elsa-May said as she reached Freda. "I knew you couldn't stay away." Freda managed to smile, feeling slightly more at ease. "I couldn't have done it without your encouragement." Ettie looked over the hens and nodded approvingly. "They look fantastic. Like real winners." Maggie joined in, glancing around the setup. "You've done a great job as always." With her friends around, Freda felt a bit of the tension ease from her shoulders. The familiarity of their banter and the process of preparing her hens allowed her to focus on the task at hand. The judging began not long after, and Freda did her best to maintain composure. The lead judge, a stern man with a gray beard, moved slowly down the row of cages. As he approached, Freda adjusted the positioning of one hen, giving her feathers a final fluff. Ettie, Elsa-May, and Maggie watched from nearby, occasionally whispering to one another about the competition. The fairgrounds remained abuzz with activity, but Freda blocked out the noise and whispers, focusing solely on her hens and the judging. When the judges finally reached her display, Freda stood tall, her hands steady. The lead judge examined each hen carefully, nodding occasionally. As they waited for the final results, Ettie and the others returned, chatting excitedly about the different birds they'd seen. Elsa-May handed Freda a piece of homemade apple pie. "Eat this. You've got to keep your strength up." Freda took the pie, smiling at her friend's infectious optimism. "I could use some of that." As the afternoon wore on, the crowd gathered in front of the main tent for the announcement of the winners. Freda stood with her friends at her side, her heart pounding in her chest. This moment was always nerve-wracking, but today felt especially significant. The lead judge stepped up to the microphone, his voice booming across the fairgrounds. "And now for the best in show." Freda held her breath. First place again for 9 years in a row goes to Freda Fisher. The crowd erupted in applause, and Freda felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had done it. Despite everything, she had won. Mr. Green and his son Martin weren't clapping. Ettie noticed that as others were congratulating Freda, and then something awful happened. Chapter 33. "This is unfair," Green shouted, his face red with frustration. He pointed toward Freda's hens, his voice carrying over the fairground noise. "It's rigged, I tell you. She wins every year, no matter what." The crowd turned toward the commotion, eyes widening at the spectacle. Green's son, clearly embarrassed, grabbed his father's arm. "Calm down. It's just a competition." But Green wasn't having it. He pulled his arm free, glaring not just at Freda, but at anyone who dared meet his eyes. "Every single year. It's always Freda. How's a man supposed to win when it's the same result year after year?" Freda tried to remain composed, but it was clear that Green's outburst rattled her. Ettie noticed the slight tremble in Freda's hands as she tucked the blue ribbon into her pocket. Elsa-May made a move toward her, but Ettie's eyes were already on Green. His anger seemed to go beyond mere disappointment. There was a sharpness to it, like years of resentment bubbling over. Ettie's gaze drifted beyond Green, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Neville was there, standing near a tent, his eyes fixed on Green. His expression was hard to read. Beside him, Narita stood with her arms crossed, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. As Green continued to vent his frustration, Ettie noticed how Narita's eyes darted around nervously, as if she were waiting for something or someone. Her unease caught Ettie's attention, and when Narita started moving away from the crowd, Ettie made a quick decision to follow her. Elsa-May, keep an eye on Freda, Ettie whispered to her sister. I'm going to see what Narita's up to. Ettie slipped through the crowd with surprising agility for her age, keeping a safe distance from Narita but not losing sight of her. Narita weaved between tents and dodging vendors. Something about Narita's haste suggested she was headed toward something and not just escaping the commotion. Eventually, Ettie lost sight of her, so headed back to the others. She was halfway back when she heard voices, low, agitated, and unmistakably male. Peering around a corner, Ettie spotted Neville and Green standing a few yards away, their faces inches apart. Neville's expression was tense, while Green's was still flushed from his earlier outburst. "This is your mess, Neville," Green hissed, his voice rough with anger. "You should have kept it under control. Now look at what's happened." Neville glanced around, as if worried they were being overheard. "Keep your voice down. This isn't the place for this discussion." "I don't care where we are." Green shot back, his voice rising again. "I want answers. I had a deal with his father, and now it's all going to garbage because of your mistakes." Ettie strained to hear every word, her instincts telling her that this argument was more than just about Freda's victory. The mention of a deal with the victim's father made her ears perk up. She crouched behind a nearby trailer, trying to remain hidden while still close enough to catch the conversation. Neville's tone turned defensive. "You think I wanted any of this? The old man left a mess behind, and I was trying to clean it up. But you're not making it easy." Green sneered. "Clean it up? You've only made it worse. I'm not the only one who has something to lose here, Neville." Neville stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Don't threaten me, Green. You don't know what I've had to deal with." Ettie's mind raced. This wasn't just an argument about money or business. There was a history here, one that involved the victim's father, Neville, and Green. Ettie couldn't help but wonder how deep this entanglement went. She needed to know more. Green's son suddenly appeared, looking for his father. "Dad, what are you doing back here?" Both men turned abruptly, startled by the interruption. Ettie ducked further behind the trailer, holding her breath. "Nothing, son," Green snapped, though his tone was softer. "Just handling some business." The younger man didn't look convinced, but decided not to press the issue. "Come on. We should go before you get yourself into more trouble." Green hesitated, casting one last glare at Neville before following his son. "This isn't over," he muttered, loud enough for Neville to hear. Once they were gone, Neville let out a deep sigh, rubbing his temples. Ettie considered her next move. She could confront Neville directly, but she wasn't sure how much he'd be willing to reveal. Instead, she waited for him to leave, then slipped out from her hiding spot. Back at the main fairgrounds, Ettie rejoined Elsa-May and Maggie. "Where did she go?" Elsa-May asked. "I lost her. I did stumble across Harold Green and Neville having a heated discussion," Ettie said quietly. "It wasn't just about Freda winning. They were talking about some kind of deal with the victim's father." Maggie's eyes narrowed. "So they're more involved than we thought?" Ettie nodded. "Much more. We need to dig deeper into their past dealings with the victim's family. There's something here that's being kept quiet, and it might just be the key to solving this." Chapter 34. The fairgrounds were beginning to clear out, with families and competitors packing up after a long day. Ettie, Elsa-May, and Maggie lingered near the exit, taking in the last bits of activity before heading home. Freda was still busy chatting with well-wishers after her big win, and Ettie felt a sense of satisfaction for her friend. But there was still much on Ettie's mind. As she turned toward the parking area, Ettie noticed Narita standing by herself near a row of parked cars. She seemed lost in thought, her face drawn and weary. Sensing an opportunity, Ettie decided to approach her. It was time to see if Narita might be more forthcoming, away from the crowds and chaos. "Hello, Narita," Ettie said warmly as she neared. Narita looked up, startled at first, but then managed a weak smile. "Oh, Ettie. I didn't see you there. I just wanted to say hello before we leave. It's been a strange day, hasn't it?" Narita's expression softened a bit. "It certainly has. I don't like coming to these things." Ettie nodded understandingly. I noticed there was some tension between your brother and Harold Green earlier. But I suppose there's more to it than just chicken shows, isn't there? Narita seemed to hesitate for a moment, then sighed deeply. Yes, there's more to it, she admitted, lowering her voice. I've heard you've been asking questions about Aaron and David Graeber. I have. It seems their past dealings might be linked to what's happening now. You know how small towns are, rumors fly, but the truth can be hard to pin down. Narita glanced around, making sure they were alone. If I tell you something, will you promise to keep it to yourself for now? I don't want my brother dragged into something without cause. Ettie's eyes met Narita's, and she gave a reassuring nod. Of course. You have my word. Narita seemed to consider this for a moment, then spoke quietly. There's an old ledger, she said. It belonged to David Graeber, Aaron's father. It's been missing for years, but it's recently come up again. It's said to contain details about financial dealings, some legal, some not. Both Green and my brother have been trying to get hold of it. Ettie's heart beat faster. And why is it so important? Because it could ruin them, Narita replied. Back when Aaron's father was alive, he made deals with both Green and Neville. Loans, investments, and other arrangements that weren't exactly above board. When Aaron Graeber died, they thought the ledger was lost and with it their secrets. But if the ledger resurfaces, it could expose everything. Ettie processed the information quickly. So that's what the argument was about today? Narita nodded. Yes. They're both desperate to find the ledger before it falls into the wrong hands, like the police or someone who might use it against them. Ettie thought for a moment. Do you think David knew about it? Could that be why he was killed? Narita's face darkened. I don't know for sure, but I think it's possible. The talk I've heard is that David had started asking questions about his father's business dealings. Neville was worried that David might have found out more than he should have. Ettie's mind raced. This was a clear motive for both Green and Neville, but it also meant Aaron's death was likely tied to old debts and unfinished business. Do you have any idea where this ledger might be? Ettie asked. I wish I did. My brother has been frantic about it. He even asked me to look for any old papers around the house, but I haven't found anything. Ettie let out a slow breath. Thank you for telling me this, Narita. It's a lot to take in, but it helps make sense of things. I just hope it doesn't come to more trouble. I've seen what secrets like these can do, and I don't want to lose my brother over something that happened years ago. Ettie placed a comforting hand on Narita's arm. I'll do my best to get to the bottom of this, without causing unnecessary harm. But the truth needs to come out for everyone's sake. As they said their goodbyes, Ettie walked back toward her sister, her mind buzzing with the new information. Find out anything interesting? Elsa-May asked. I did, and it makes me wonder just how desperate Green and Neville are to keep their secrets hidden. Ettie told them about the ledger. Chapter 35. The horse and buggy moved steadily along the dirt road, the rhythmic clopping of hooves offering a soothing counterpoint to the whirlwind of thoughts in Eddie's mind. So that's what all the fuss has been about, Maggie said. An old ledger that could ruin both Green and Neville. Ettie nodded, staring ahead but not really seeing the road. Exactly. And if Aaron found out what was in it, that might explain why he was killed. Elsa-May shook her head slowly. It's hard to believe that something from so long ago could still cause so much trouble now. It's not just the past, Ettie said. It's what the past holds over the present. If that ledger surfaces, it could mean prison or worse for both of them. Why would she tell you about it, Ettie? Maggie asked. I'm not sure. Maybe she wants an end to things. I know that Freda has a box of things in the barn. They belong to Isaac. We should look into that, Elsa-May said. They rode in thoughtful silence for a few moments, the farmstead coming into view in the distance. It wasn't long before they arrived at Freda's house. Freda arrived not long after, and they helped her unload the chickens. She gave them permission to look in the box Isaac had left behind. Once the chickens were settled, they headed to the barn with Freda leading the way. Over here, Freda said, pointing to a dusty corner where several old boxes were stacked. Freda got down and pulled everything out of one box. Ettie moved closer, seeing a collection of papers, a few old ledgers and some personal belongings. Start with these, Ettie said, reaching for the ledgers. She flipped through the first one quickly, her trained eyes scanning for any signs of David Graeber's name or unusual financial entries. This one's just farm expenses, Ettie said, handing it to Elsa-May. Check the next one. Maggie found a stack of letters tied together with twine and began to read through them. These look like personal correspondence, mostly about farm matters. Nothing suspicious so far. Ettie continued her search, opening a smaller notebook that looked older and more worn. The pages were yellowed, and the ink had faded over time. As she flipped through it, something caught her eye, a name scrawled hastily on one of the pages, David Graeber. I found something. The others gathered around as Ettie studied the entry. It was a list of transactions, and David Graeber's name appeared alongside several other names, including Green's and Neville's. These are loan amounts, Ettie murmured. And it looks like Aaron Graeber was lending large sums to both Green and Neville. But there are no details about whether they were ever repaid. Elsa-May frowned. It seems as though a ledger does exist. Ettie nodded. David came back to get his money, and someone didn't want to pay. It's not the main ledger Narita was talking about, but it confirms that her brother and Green were deeply involved with David's father, Aaron Graeber. It's a piece of the puzzle, but maybe it's not the full picture. Freda, who had been watching quietly, looked troubled. Do you think my brother knew about this? That he kept it here on purpose? Ettie put a comforting hand on Freda's shoulder. It's hard to say. He might not have known the significance of these documents, but it's clear they were hidden for a reason. Just as Ettie was about to speak again, Maggie let out a small gasp. Ettie, look at this. She held up a loose sheet of paper she had found at the bottom of the box. Ettie took the paper and read it carefully. It was a hastily written note, similar to what Narita had described. If you find the ledger, destroy it. Don't let anyone see what's inside. Elsa-May's eyes widened. That's definitely a warning, and it means that there is a ledger. Ettie nodded grimly. We're dealing with people who have a lot to lose if these secrets come to light. Freda's face grew pale. Do you think this has something to do with David's death? It's very possible, Ettie said. If Isaac started asking questions, it could have put him in serious danger. The air in the barn seemed to grow colder, and Ettie felt a chill run down her spine. The discovery of the partial ledger and the note made one thing clear. Aaron's death was not a random act of violence. It was connected to secrets that had been buried for years. We need to take this to Detective Kelly, Elsa-May said firmly. Ettie shook her head. Not yet. We don't have the full ledger, and without it we can't prove anything. We need to keep digging and see if we can find out more. Maggie's expression was determined. But we're close, aren't we? Ettie met her sister's eyes. Yes, we're close. But we're also walking a dangerous line. Whoever's behind this is willing to kill to protect their secrets. Chapter 36. The following day, Ettie and Elsa-May decided to visit Harold Green once more. As they approached the door, Ettie knocked firmly. After a moment the door opened, and Green stood there with a wary expression. What do you want? We need to talk about Aaron, Ettie said. May we come in? Green hesitated but finally stepped aside. Fine, he said. But make it quick. Ettie and Elsa-May entered, taking in the cluttered room. Ettie sat across from Green while Elsa-May stood nearby. We found something interesting, Ettie said. Green frowned. What? Ettie reached into her bag and pulled out a copy of the partial ledger. Recognize this? She said. Green's eyes flickered to the paper before quickly looking away. No, he said. This was found in a place connected to Aaron, Ettie said. We believe it might explain why David was killed. I don't know anything about that, Green said. Elsa-May watched him closely. Are you sure? She said. Because this ledger looks like it might be related to your business. I told you I don't know anything, Green snapped. If you don't know anything, why does this bother you? Ettie asked. Green's face flushed. It doesn't. The both of you are bothering me. He stood up abruptly. You two need to leave. We will, Ettie said. But if you remember anything, you know where to find us. Green didn't respond and turned his back on them. Ettie and Elsa-May exchanged a look before heading to the door. As they stepped outside, Ettie glanced back at Green through the window. He was muttering to himself, his shoulders tense. "Something's not right," Ettie said. Before they reached the gate, Green came charging out holding a ledger high in the air. "Is this what you want?" he shouted. "Fine, then take it." He thrust a large brown ledger into Eddie's hands. Ettie barely had time to respond before Green turned and slammed the door behind him, leaving the sisters shocked. Elsa-May blinked. "Well, that was easier than expected." Ettie looked down at the ledger in her hands. "Now we can finally put this to rest." As Ettie and Elsa-May turned to leave Green's house and get back in the waiting taxi, a young man approached from the road. Ettie recognized him immediately, Martin, Green's son. Martin looked around cautiously before lowering his voice. "I see you've got the ledger." Eddie's eyes narrowed. "Your father gave it to us, but we haven't had a chance to look at it. What do you know about it?" Martin glanced back toward his father's house. "I know more than I should," he said. "But I think you deserve to know the truth." Ettie stepped closer. "Go on." "Narita and Neville are involved. David found out they had taken a huge loan, saying they couldn't pay it back and they were skimming money from some kind of shared business. That ledger proves it all." Elsa-May gasped. "So David was killed to cover it up?" "Yes," Martin said. "And my father, he was just trying to keep things on an even keel." Ettie sighed, finally feeling the pieces click into place. "Thank you, Martin. This is what we needed to end this. And get Freda's brother out of jail." Martin nodded, and the sisters hurried to the taxi and headed to see Detective Kelly. Chapter 37. Detective Kelly looked up as they entered his office. "What brings you both here?" Ettie held up the ledger. "We've got something important." Kelly's eyes narrowed with interest. "What is it?" "This is what Green finally handed over," Ettie said. "Martin, Green's son, told us it implicates Narita and Neville," Elsa-May told him. Kelly raised an eyebrow. "Whatever it is, I'll need to go through it all carefully." Ettie felt a surge of determination. "And that makes Isaac innocent." Kelly leaned back in his chair. "I'll have to ask him some more questions now we've got this information." "There was no gang after him," Elsa-May said. "He was probably just going to expose Neville and Narita. Or maybe it was just Neville because Narita seemed so nice." Kelly rubbed his chin. "It's worth following your ideas through. Perhaps it was David thinking that Isaac was somehow involved, and that's why David and Isaac fought. And Isaac told his sister a story about a gang to keep her out of what was really going on," Ettie suggested. Elsa-May looked puzzled. "Why would Isaac lie about that? Why make up a gang?" Kelly sighed. "Maybe he thought it'd keep others away, or possibly keep his sister safe." Ettie glanced at the ledger. "You think this will explain why David Graeber was killed?" Kelly reached for the ledger and flipped it open, scanning the pages. "There are a lot of entries here. I'm seeing some familiar names. If money was not paid back to David Graeber's father, it could explain a lot. I'll need time to go through this ledger and match it to other evidence we have." Ettie nodded. "We understand." Kelly paused and looked up at them. "I appreciate your help." Ettie and Elsa-May stood up to leave, but Kelly stopped them. "I'll keep you updated." "Please do," Ettie said. "We want to make sure Narita can live in peace. And hopefully after you read that, Isaac can be released." They said goodbye to the detective and walked out into the crisp air. "Let's just hope this is the end of it," Ettie said. "Before we go home, we'll warn Freda to keep clear of her neighbors." Chapter 38. Ettie and Elsa-May trudged back home after warning Freda to keep away from her neighbors. Ettie felt a familiar sense of relief wash over her as they stepped into the cozy warmth of their kitchen. Ettie put the kettle on, and then headed to the living room to check her blood pressure. The machine whirred and beeped as it inflated, louder than usual. "This thing gets noisier by the day," she muttered. Elsa-May, who had just settled into her favorite chair, looked over. "Might be time to replace it," she said. "Maybe," Ettie said. "But it still works, so I'll make do." As Ettie waited for the numbers to appear, Her mind wandered back to the ledger they'd found. She remembered how many entries were crossed out, rubbed out, or rewritten in pencil. It was as if someone had been second-guessing themselves constantly. "Strange, isn't it?" Ettie said. "How many things were erased and rewritten in that ledger?" Elsa-May nodded. "That's how they used to do it in the old days," she said. "Before calculators and computers. People did everything in pencil, double-checked their numbers, and corrected them if they made a mistake." Ettie frowned. "But that means it could have been changed by anyone, anytime." "That was normal back then. It's how things were kept accurate." Ettie wasn't convinced. "It doesn't seem like proper evidence if someone could just erase something and write over it." Elsa-May shrugged. "I don't know. Detective Kelly might just think it's a load of garbage, and Isaac might be charged with a murder he did not commit." As Ettie spoke, Kelly the cat batted at the cord of the blood pressure machine. Ettie shooed her away gently. "Not now, Kelly. I'm trying to think." Elsa-May looked thoughtful. "It's possible the figures were changed, but it's something we'll never know." Ettie sighed. "Who had access to that ledger before we found it?" "Green for sure," Elsa-May said. "And Martin," Ettie said. "But maybe others too." Elsa-May nodded. "But why change things in pencil? Wouldn't it be safer to use ink?" Ettie considered this. Unless they wanted to be able to change it again later. True. Ettie's brow furrowed. But who would have done that? And why? "Maybe someone is trying to cover their tracks," Elsa-May suggested. Ettie's eyes widened slightly. "That's what I'm thinking. And if that's the case, the whole thing could be a setup." "For what?" Ettie's thoughts were racing now. "We need to tell Detective Kelly about this," she said. Elsa-May raised an eyebrow. "No. We just gave him the ledger, and now you want to tell him it's not accurate or not real." "Oh, I don't know." Elsa-May leaned forward. "Do you think the changes were made to frame someone?" "Maybe," Ettie said. "Or maybe to hide the real reason behind David's death. What if it wasn't about the money at all?" "Do you think we missed something?" Elsa-May asked. "Maybe not missed," Ettie said. "But misunderstood." Elsa-May shook her head. "It's all so complicated." The cat, Kelly, had managed to get hold of the cord again and was batting it playfully. Ettie pulled it gently from her paws. "No more of that. I hope Kelly solves this case soon." On hearing her name, Kelly the cat meowed, staring at Elsa-May. "Not you, Kelly. I'm talking about Detective Kelly." The cat meowed again. "She's hungry," Ettie said. As Elsa-May headed to the kitchen with Kelly following, her tail swishing through the air, Ettie's mind was already working, trying to piece together the puzzle. The noise from the blood pressure machine faded completely, replaced by the sound of her thoughts. Chapter 39. Ettie woke early the next morning, feeling a surge of determination. When Elsa-May joined her in the kitchen, she announced, "I've got a theory." Elsa-May, still bleary-eyed, raised an eyebrow. "What kind of theory?" "You'll see." "You're not going to tell me?" Elsa-May said, frowning. "Not yet." Elsa-May sighed. "I suppose we're going out then?" "Yes," Ettie said. "We're going to see Neville and Narita." "Today?" Elsa-May said. "Of course today." Within the hour, they were on their way. As the taxi pulled up in front of the junk shop, Ettie noted the familiar sign. A few customers were browsing outside, muttering about the high prices of the old furniture. Soon the small crowd dispersed, leaving the front of the shop clear. Ettie nudged Elsa-May. "Let's go." They stepped out of the taxi and approached the entrance. As they got closer, Ettie spotted Narita standing just inside the shop. Narita noticed them and walked out to meet them, smiling. "What brings you here?" Narita asked. "We'd like to speak with Neville," Ettie said. Narita's eyes shifted slightly. "He's not here today, I'm sorry. He had a medical appointment in town." Ettie and Elsa-May exchanged a glance. "In that case, we'd like to look around." "Do you have any blood pressure machines?" Elsa-May asked. Narita shook her head. "No." "We'll look around anyway," Ettie said. Narita's jaw tightened. What are you looking for? I might have found that old ledger you were talking about, Ettie said. Narita's face contorted into a mix of anger and surprise. Is that right? I never thought it existed, but where did you find it? Ettie caught the brief flash of panic in Narita's eyes, but before she could respond, a faint knocking sound caught her attention. What was that? Ettie asked. Narita stiffened. I don't hear anything. Elsa-May tilted her head. It's coming from here. Narita's eyes widened as Elsa-May moved toward the back of the shop, where the sound seemed to be coming from. Elsa-May paused in front of a heavy metal door that Ettie recognized as a hurricane shelter. It's in here. Narita took a step forward, her voice rising. Don't open that. Elsa-May ignored her and pulled the latch. The door creaked open, revealing the dim interior of the shelter. Ettie squinted into the darkness as Elsa-May switched on a flashlight that had been hanging nearby. The beam of light immediately fell on a figure tied to a chair, gagged and struggling weakly. It's Neville. Elsa-May cried. Ettie's heart raced as she stepped closer to get a better look. Neville's eyes were wide with fear, and he tried to make muffled sounds through the gag. Suddenly, Ettie felt the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She turned around, and there stood Narita pointing a gun directly at them. Chapter 40. Step away, Narita warned. Ettie's mind spun. What are you doing, Narita? You should have stayed out of this. Elsa-May's voice was trembling. You tied up Neville? He was getting in the way. Ettie's eyes narrowed. Was it you then? Did you kill David Graeber? Narita's face darkened. He gave me no choice. He threatened to expose me. Ettie glanced at Neville, then back at Narita. And Neville, she said. What did he do to deserve this? He was going to turn me in. I couldn't let that happen. You can't get away with this, Elsa-May told her. I can try. Narita's grip tightened on the gun. Ettie took a slow, careful step toward Narita. Put the gun down. There's no need for more violence. There's no going back now. Both of you get into the shelter now. She gestured with the gun. Ettie and Elsa-May had no choice but to walk down the dark steps. If you try to come out, I'll shoot, Narita said, slamming the door. Then they heard it bolt shut. Elsa-May rushed to Neville, quickly untying the ropes around his wrists. Ettie fumbled in the dark to remove the gag. Neville stood up and switched on a light. She's evil, Neville gasped, rubbing his sore wrist. I've been terrified of her since she arrived 4 weeks ago. Ettie's brow furrowed. Why didn't you say anything? I knew she killed the man next door, but I was too afraid. I thought I'd be next if I spoke up. You should have gone to the police, Elsa-May said. I know that now. She's going to kill all of us. What did you do to upset her? Elsa-May asked. I figured out what she'd done. She embezzled money from Aaron, and David found out and was blackmailing her. Isaac and David never saw eye to eye, and when he found out Isaac was staying next door, he wanted to settle some score. Anyway, what does that matter now? We're all going to be killed. Elsa-May looked around the shelter. Is there any other way out of here? There's a window over there. It's covered by boards, but I can rip them off. If we get out, she'll hear us, and she's got a gun. Ettie scanned the dim interior, her mind racing. Then she looked down at the bag she was carrying, her blood pressure machine. The thought came to her in a flash. I think I have an idea. What is it? Elsa-May asked. She pulled out her blood pressure machine that was in the bag slung over her shoulder. If I can rig it to make enough noise, maybe we can use it as a distraction. Elsa-May stared at her. How? Ettie quickly opened the bag and pulled out the machine. This thing is loud enough already. If I can modify it to run continuously, the noise might be enough to confuse Narita, at least long enough for us to get out the window. Then Neville can get to the nearest phone. I've got my cell phone in my pocket, but there's no signal in here, but it'll work when we're outside. This could work. Ettie tinkered with the settings, adjusting the machine to inflate and deflate repeatedly. The noise filled the small space, a series of loud rapid hisses and beeps. Now what? Elsa-May said. We'll get close to the door, Ettie said. When I signal, I'll put it up near the door. If she hears the noise, she won't hear those boards being pulled off the windows. With the machine whirring loudly, Ettie set it on the ground at the top of the stairs by the door. Meanwhile, Neville ripped the boards from the window with his bare hands. It didn't take long to loosen the old rusted nails. Now, Neville whispered urgently. Ettie looked up at the window. You go. Don't wait for us. Hurry. He looked back at them and then got through the window. Elsa-May and Ettie huddled together. I hope he can get his phone to work. Just then light shone on them. It was Narita opening the door. Immediately Ettie regretted not going out that window. Narita started coming down the steps toward them with the gun still in her hands. Chapter 41. When Narita got to the bottom, she looked around. Where's Neville? He got away, Ettie said. I'll deal with the both of you first. Then he'll get what's coming to him. Are you going to shoot us? Elsa-May asked. Yes. Any last requests? Narita cackled like an old witch. I have one, Ettie said, trying to stall. Why did you kill David? Elsa-May hissed. His name was David. Oh yes. Why did you kill David? He'd been blackmailing me for years. He had it coming to him. One thing I can't work out was that Freda told us she'd tied him up. When she came back, he had no ropes around him and he was in the coop. I followed him over to Freda's. I saw the whole thing. Somehow Freda's brother had managed to knock him out cold. But he came to and I cut off his ropes. I had this idea he'd never be found if I left his body in a chicken coop. I thought it would be the perfect ending for him. So, Ettie took over? You pulled the gun on him after you cut off his ropes and had him walk into the co-op? That's right, and I shot him in the back because he'd been digging a knife in my back for years. She brought the gun up as though she was going to shoot them. Elsa-May stepped forward. One last thing. Just at that moment the sound of sirens filled the air. Ettie felt a wave of relief wash over her when Narita turned and rushed back up the steps to make her getaway. Elsa-May and Ettie clung onto each other and waited for a few minutes. Neville appeared at the top of the stairs. Are you both okay? Yes, Ettie said, rushing forward. Only just, Elsa-May added as she followed Ettie up the stairs into the daylight. They saw Narita being led to a car and she was in handcuffs. Neville wiped the sweat off his brow. I can't thank you enough. If you two hadn't turned up when you did, it would have been over for me. Elsa-May leaned down and picked up the blood pressure machine. It was crushed and broken. Oh, Ettie. Look at this. How will you take your blood pressure now? Ettie smiled. I'm not worried at all. If I survive today, I can survive anything. Chapter 42. A week had passed since the events at the junk shop, and Ettie's living room was filled with the comforting scent of freshly baked goods. Ettie, Elsa-May, Freda, and Isaac sat around the table, which was covered with plates of cookies, slices of cake, and soft rolls, all made with Freda's wonderful eggs. Isaac grinned. It feels good to be free. I still can't believe I was locked up for something I didn't do. We're just glad it's over, Elsa-May said. And that you're here with us. Freda beamed at her brother. I knew you were innocent. Still, it's a relief to have it settled. Snowy the dog, clearly enjoying the festive mood, ran around the room in circles, barking playfully. Kelly the cat, meanwhile, sat on the back of Elsa-May's chair, batting at the tassels of her shawl. Ettie smiled as she watched the scene. You know, for a while there I wasn't so sure who was telling the truth, she said. I even suspected Mr. Green because of all those crossed-out entries in the ledger. Freda nodded, taking a sip of tea. I can see why you would, she said. It looked suspicious. Ettie sighed. But it doesn't matter now, she said. The real culprit was found and justice was done. Thank goodness for that, Elsa-May said. I was getting tired of the whole mess. Freda chuckled. Well, a funny thing did come out of it. Ettie looked curious. What's that, she asked. I'm actually teaching Martin things now, Freda said, a twinkle in her eye. He's a nice young man, and I need to impart my knowledge to someone, seeing as I don't have any children. Is he really interested? Elsa-May asked. Oh, he is. He's eager to learn, and I think he might just have a knack for it. Ettie smiled. That's good to hear. Martin seemed like a good sort, caught up in all the wrong things. Yes. It's nice having someone to teach, Freda said. Snowy bounded over, wagging his tail and eyeing a biscuit on the table. You've had enough treats, Snowy, Elsa-May said, laughing. Kelly meanwhile leapt down from the chair and started chasing her own tail, drawing giggles from Freda and Isaac. It's almost as if they know everything's back to normal, Ettie said. It does feel like that. I've missed the simple things of life after being locked up, Isaac said. Ettie picked up a plate of cookies and offered them to Freda. Made with your eggs, of course. Freda took one and bit into it. Best eggs in town, she said proudly. Elsa-May reached for a roll. And this is the best company too. Agreed, Ettie said. After everything that's happened, it's nice to have a bit of peace and quiet. Isaac looked thoughtful. Do you think there'll be any more surprises? If there are, we'll handle them, Ettie said. Freda smiled. We make a good team, she said. Yes, we do, Elsa-May said. As they all laughed and talked, Snowy curled up at Eddie's feet, while Kelly settled in Elsa-May's lap, purring contentedly. After Freda and Isaac left, Ettie and Elsa-May began cleaning up the kitchen. The plates were nearly empty, and Ettie hummed softly as she wiped the table. A knock on the front door interrupted their moment of peace. Elsa-May glanced up a bit surprised. Now who could that be, she said. Ettie set down her cloth. Maybe Freda forgot something. Elsa-May opened the door to find Detective Kelly standing there, a hint of a smile on his face. Good afternoon, ladies. Oh, you must have smelled our cakes and cookies, Elsa-May teased. Detective Kelly sniffed the air, his grin widening. I do now. Well, come in. There's still some left. He stepped inside and followed them to the living room. Ettie gestured to a chair and he sat down, looking a bit out of place in the cozy room. Elsa-May handed him a plate with a piece of cake. Might as well have a taste. You've earned it. Kelly took a bite and nodded approvingly. Delicious. Ettie poured him a cup of tea. What brings you here today, Detective? He set the plate down and leaned back in the chair. I wanted to let you know that Narita was denied bail. She's in custody now awaiting trial. Ettie nodded slowly. So it's really over. Yes. Hopefully justice will be served. Elsa-May sighed. It's a relief. It's still sad knowing how things turned out. It is, Kelly agreed. But you both did an incredible job getting to the bottom of it, and I must say that I always thought there was something off about Narita. I had my suspicions about her from the start, but I needed proof. You gave me exactly what I needed. Ettie glanced at Elsa-May, who was smiling. We're glad we could help. Just then Snowy the dog began to act up, first with a few excited barks, then by trying to jump onto Kelly's lap. Oh, Snowy! Ettie exclaimed, trying to hold him back. Kelly frowned. I've never gotten used to dogs. I think we'd better put him in the bedroom, Elsa-May said. Ettie nodded, scooping up the squirming dog. You're in timeout, Snowy, she said as she carried him to the bedroom. Kelly watched with amusement. Quite a lively one, isn't he? That's putting it mildly. Elsa-May chuckled. With Snowy temporarily out of the way, calm returned to the living room, at least until Kelly the cat, perhaps feeling neglected, decided to make her presence known. She strolled in, yowling loudly, before stretching herself dramatically in front of the warm fire. Seems like the cat's not too pleased with having a guest, Kelly said with a grin. Oh, she's just jealous of Snowy getting all the attention, Ettie said. The cat continued to yowl before settling into a comfortable sprawl, her eyes closing slowly as the fire's warmth spread over her. Kelly sipped his tea thoughtfully. You two are lucky to be alive. You really shouldn't have been in the middle of things like that. We couldn't let it go once we got started, Ettie pointed out. Kelly nodded. Next time maybe let the police handle things a bit sooner, eh? Ettie and Elsa-May exchanged a look before they both burst into laughter. We'll try, Elsa-May said, still smiling. But no promises. Kelly shook his head, smiling back. Fair enough. Before long, Kelly stood up to leave. Thank you for the tea, he said. And the cake. Anytime, Ettie said. Just don't expect us to solve another case for you. I'll try not to, Kelly said, giving a playful salute before heading to the door. After he left, Ettie and Elsa-May settled back down, enjoying the quiet of the house. Think we'll ever have another adventure like this one? Elsa-May asked. I hope not, but if we do, we'll be ready. Elsa-May chuckled. As long as we've got Snowy and Kelly to keep us on our toes, she said. Ettie nodded. And plenty of baked goods to keep us going. Kelly, the cat, let out a final yowl as if to signal her approval. Snowy barked once from the bedroom, seemingly trying to get the last word in. Ettie shook her head with a smile. Well, life's never dull, is it? She said. No, Elsa-May agreed, leaning back in her chair. And that's just the way I like it. As the fire crackled softly and the smell of lingering baked goods filled the air, Ettie felt a deep sense of peace. Do you still think there's something seriously wrong with you, Ettie? Ettie thought about that for a moment. They had faced danger, solved a mystery, and even found a few unexpected friendships along the way. Possibly, but I'm not going to even think about it. Good. No more blood pressure machines for your imaginary blood pressure problem? No. Ettie shook her head. Ah, good. It'll be a quiet winter. Ettie pulled the quilt over her lap and smiled. Yes, a quiet winter, maybe with a few new recipes to try. Elsa-May grinned. Especially if Freda keeps bringing those fresh eggs. We'll have cakes for weeks. Ettie nodded. And just think, no mysteries to interrupt us. Elsa-May laughed softly. Well, unless one shows up right in the middle of a batter. Ettie's eyes twinkled. If it does, we'll be ready, with Freda's eggs and plenty of cake to keep us going. The fire crackled warmly, filling the room with a sense of comfort, and the faint promise of something sweet yet to come. Thank you for reading Roost in peace.